Every night I felt extremely exhausted, so I installed security cameras and did not tell my son about the ones inside the house. When I checked the footage after suddenly feeling sick one evening, my heart stopped. I saw my own son slipping something into my food. 4 days later, the FBI arrested him. He was not just trying to poison me. He was a serial killer. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to trust your gut instinct over your own family. My name is Grady Henderson, and at 73 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of evil this world could offer. I spent 20 years as a combat engineer clearing minefields where one wrong step meant you were pink mist. But nothing prepared me for the minefield inside my own Philadelphia townhouse. It started at 3 in the morning. I was standing in my bathroom staring at the vintage tiles I had laid myself 40 years ago when the floor suddenly rushed up to meet my face. The impact cracked my lip, but I could not even feel the pain. My arms were heavy like wet sandbags. My chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. I tried to call out, but only a wet gurgle came out of my throat. Blood began to drip from my nose, mixing with the cold sweat on the tile. This was not normal. I know my body. I still do 50 push-ups every morning. This was not a heart attack. This felt like a chemical shutdown. I must have passed out for a few minutes because the next thing I knew, the bathroom door burst open. It was not the paramedics. It was Darius, my son, and his wife Amber. They were supposed to be living across town, yet here they were in my hallway at 3 in the morning, fully dressed. Darius knelt beside me. His face was a mask of panic, but his eyes were dry. He did not check my pulse. He did not check my breathing. He just grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "Dad, can you hear me? See, Amber, I told you he is getting worse. We cannot leave him here alone anymore." Amber stood in the doorway. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the bathroom fixtures, evaluating them. Her blue eyes were cold and calculating, scanning the room like a shark scanning a reef. She stepped over my legs to open the medicine cabinet, checking the prescription dates. "Oh, Darius, this is just irresponsible. Look at him. He is a danger to himself. The nursing home has a bed opening on Monday. We need to sign the papers now before he hurts himself permanently." I wanted to scream that I was fine yesterday. I wanted to scream that I had just fixed the roof last week. But my tongue felt swollen and thick. Darius lifted me up. He was strong. I was proud of that strength once. I used to carry him on my shoulders to watch the parades. Now he was dragging me to my bedroom like a sack of unwanted laundry. He dropped me onto the mattress and I gasped for air. My lungs burned. "Stay here, Dad. I will make you something to help you sleep." Darius disappeared into the kitchen. Amber stayed in the room. She walked over to my dresser where I kept the picture of my late wife, Beatrice. She picked it up, wiped a speck of dust off the frame with her thumb, and then placed it face down. The disrespect made my blood boil enough to clear some of the fog in my brain. "You know, Grady, this house is worth a lot of money," Amber said softly. Her back turned to me. "The neighborhood is changing. Young professionals want these old townhouses. You are sitting on a gold mine, but you are living like a pauper. It is selfish, really. Darius deserves better than this. He deserves his inheritance while he is young enough to enjoy it." She turned around and smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It did not reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator who knows the prey is trapped. Darius returned with a steaming mug. The smell of warm milk and nutmeg filled the room, but underneath it there was something else. A faint metallic scent. Something bitter, like the chemical solvent we use to clean engine parts in the army. "Here, Dad, drink this. It is just warm milk with honey. It will help settle your stomach." Darius pressed the mug to my lips. His hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. I looked at my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I paid tuition for so he could become a real estate agent. He was sweating. Beads of perspiration rolled down his forehead despite the cool night air. I realized then that if I refused, they might force it down my throat, or worse, they might use a pillow. I was too weak to fight them off physically. I had to use my head. I opened my mouth and let him pour the liquid in. I held it in my cheeks, fighting the urge to gag. It tasted vile. It burned the inside of my mouth like battery acid masked by sugar. "Good. That is good. Sleep now, Dad. We will handle everything in the morning." Darius pulled the blanket up to my chin. It felt less like a gesture of care and more like he was covering a corpse. They walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. I heard their footsteps retreat down the hall. I heard the murmur of their voices in the living room. I rolled over to the side of the bed and grabbed the handkerchief I kept on the nightstand. I spit the mouthful of poison into the cloth. The liquid was thick and had turned a strange grayish color. My mouth still burned where it had touched the lining of my cheeks. I shoved the handkerchief deep under my mattress. I lay there in the darkness listening. I could hear them downstairs. They were not calling a doctor. They were opening champagne. I heard the distinct pop of a cork. "To the sail," Amber said. Her voice carried up the stairs. "To the sail," Darius replied. But his voice was lower, trembling. "Do you think he suspects anything? He is senile." Darius. Amber laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "He thinks it is just old age. By Monday, he will be too confused to know his own name. Then we get power of attorney. Then we get the house." I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. My heart was pounding not from the poison but from a cold, hard rage. They thought I was a senile old man. They thought I was a helpless victim who would quietly fade away so they could cash out my life's work. They forgot who I was. They forgot that before I was a father or a husband, I was a sergeant in the engineer corps. My job was to find hidden threats and neutralize them. I did not sleep that night. I lay still, letting the adrenaline burn the toxins out of my system. When the sun came up, Darius and Amber were gone. They had left a note on the kitchen table saying they would be back in the evening to check on me. They thought they had won. They thought the old man would spend the day sleeping off the drug. I forced myself up. My legs were shaky, but my mind was clear. I went to the garage, my workshop. This was my sanctuary. Shelves of tools, boxes of spare parts, wires, circuits, and batteries. I had been tinkering with electronics since the 70s. I bypassed the dusty boxes and went straight to the locked cabinet in the back. Inside were the components I had bought months ago to catch package thieves. High-definition micro cameras, motion sensors. My hands, which had been trembling in the bedroom, were steady now. I picked up a soldering iron. If they wanted to play games, I would change the rules. I spent the next 6 hours working. I took down the smoke detector in the kitchen and hollowed it out, placing a wide-angle lens inside. I drilled a microscopic hole in the eyes of the deer head mounted in the living room. I hid a microphone behind the thermostat. Every wire was hidden. Every signal was encrypted. I connected the feed to a private cloud server that only I could access from my old laptop. By 4 p.m, the house was no longer just a home. It was a surveillance trap. I sat in my armchair in the living room and opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing me the kitchen in high definition. The angle was perfect. It looked directly at the stove where my food was prepared. At 5 o'clock, the front door opened. Darius walked in carrying a grocery bag. He looked tired, but there was a bounce in his step, the bounce of a man who thinks he is about to become rich. "Hey, Dad, feeling better?" he asked, putting the bag on the counter. I looked at him, really looked at him. I did not see my son anymore. I saw a target. "Much better, son," I said. My voice was raspy but steady. "Good." Darius smiled. "I am going to make you some soup. Your favorite. Beef and barley." I watched him go into the kitchen. I did not follow him. Instead, I looked down at my laptop screen. On the screen, I saw Darius take a small glass vial out of his pocket. He looked over his shoulder, checking the empty hallway. Then he uncorked the vial and tipped it over the simmering pot. My heart hammered against my ribs. There it was, the proof. But as I watched him stir the poison into my dinner, I noticed something else on the screen, something that made my blood run cold. Darius placed the vial back in his pocket, but when he pulled his hand out, a stack of cards fell onto the counter. Credit cards. Bright-colored plastic. He quickly gathered them up, but the camera resolution was sharp. I paused the video and zoomed in. The name on the top card was not Darius Henderson. It was Martha Johnson. Martha Johnson was my neighbor from 3 doors down. A sweet lady who baked pies for the church. She had disappeared 2 months ago. Her family said she moved to Arizona suddenly, but here was her credit card in my son's pocket. I realized then that this was not just about my house. This was not just a greedy son waiting for his father to die. I was living with a predator who had already fed on the flock, and I was the next meal. Darius walked out of the kitchen with a steaming bowl of soup. "Here you go, Dad," he said, his face the picture of filial devotion. "Eat up. It will give you strength." I looked at the soup. Then I looked at my son. I knew I had to play the long game. "Thank you, son," I said, reaching for the spoon. I knew the cameras were rolling. I knew the truth was being recorded. But as I lifted the spoon to my mouth, my hand shaking intentionally, I knew that tonight was going to be the longest night of my life. I had to survive dinner. Because if what I suspected was true about Martha Johnson, then the monster under my roof had done this before, and he was getting good at it. I sat there at the kitchen table staring at the bowl of beef and barley soup. The steam rising from it smelled delicious, rich, and savory, just the way my late wife Beatrice used to make it. But on my laptop screen, I was watching the truth in high definition. The footage from the kitchen camera was playing on a loop. I watched my son Darius snap on a pair of blue latex gloves, the kind I used to use when changing oil in the garage. He moved with a terrifying precision. He did not hesitate. He did not shake. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small glass vial with no label, and tipped 3 drops into the simmering pot. 3 drops. That was the difference between a meal and a murder weapon. But what hurt more than the poison was seeing Amber in the background. She was leaning against the refrigerator, scrolling through her phone. She did not even look up when Darius poisoned his own father. She looked bored. She tapped her screen, probably checking Instagram or looking at designer handbags while my execution was being prepared 5 feet away from her. It was casual. It was routine. It was the banality of evil right there in my kitchen. I looked at the soup again. My stomach growled, betraying me, but my mind was screaming. I thought about Sunday mornings at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. I thought about Darius sitting next to me in his little suit, his legs swinging too short to reach the floor, singing hymns about grace and redemption. I paid for his private school. I worked double shifts at the construction site in the freezing Philadelphia winters so he would never have to touch a shovel. I built him up to be a man of God, and now he was a man who wore latex gloves to kill the hand that fed him. I could not call the police yet. Not now. I knew how this looked. An old black man with a history of heart trouble ranting about his upstanding real estate agent's son poisoning him. Without the vial, without knowing exactly what was in that soup, it was just a video of a man adding seasoning to a pot. Darius would say it was vitamins. He would say it was flavor enhancer. And with Amber's sweet-talking ways, they would have me committed to a psychiatric ward by morning. Once I was in the system, I was dead. I needed the weapon. I needed that vial. I stood up and took the bowl of soup to the sink. I could not pour it down the drain. Darius checked things. He was meticulous. If he saw residue in the pipes, or if the garbage disposal sounded wet, he might suspect. I went to the pantry and found an empty plastic Ziploc bag. I poured the soup into the bag, sealed it tight, and shoved it deep into the trash can, hiding it inside an empty cereal box. I washed the bowl and spoon, drying them perfectly. Then I sat back down and waited. At 10 o'clock, Darius came down. He saw the empty bowl and smiled. It was a genuine smile. A smile that said he was calculating how long until the inheritance check cleared. "Did you enjoy it, Dad?" he asked. "It was good, son," I said, forcing my voice to sound weak and grateful. "I am feeling very tired now. I think I will turn in." "Good sleep is the best medicine," Darius said, patting my shoulder. His hand felt heavy and hot through my shirt. "Just let go, Dad. Don't fight it." I walked up the stairs, listening to the creak of my own knees. I went into my room and shut the door. But I did not get into bed. I put a pillow under the covers to make it look like a body was sleeping there. Then I sat in the dark, sitting on the hard wooden floor by the door, and waited. I waited for the house to settle. I waited for the sounds of their night routine to end. The running water, the murmur of the TV, the shutting of their bedroom door. At midnight, the house was silent. I opened my door. The hallway was pitch black. I knew every loose floorboard in this house. I had laid them myself in 1982. I knew to step on the left side of the 3rd plank. I knew to skip the 7th step entirely. I moved like a ghost. I moved like the soldier I used to be back in the humid jungles where a snapped twig meant death. I reached the door to the guest room, Darius and Amber's room. I could hear Darius snoring a low, rhythmic rumble. Amber was breathing softly. I turned the handle. It was locked, of course. But I was a master carpenter. This was a standard interior pin lock. I pulled a thin, stiff wire from my pocket, one I had prepared earlier from a paperclip. I slid it into the emergency hole on the knob and pushed. There was a tiny click. I turned the handle a fraction of an inch at a time. I pushed the door open just wide enough to slip through. The room smelled of expensive cologne and lavender lotion, the smell of money. Street lights filtered through the blinds, casting long, striped shadows across the bed. They were asleep. Darius was sprawled out on his back, his mouth open. Amber was curled up tight, clutching her pillow. I crept past the bed. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was afraid they would hear it. If they woke up now, if Darius saw me creeping around his room at 2 a.m, I did not know what I would do. I was 73. I could not fight him, not physically. I went to the closet. Darius was obsessed with his shoes. He had a stack of limited edition sneaker boxes piled high on the shelf. That was where a man like him hid his secrets, not in a safe but in his trophies. I reached up. My shoulder joint popped softly. I froze. Darius shifted in the bed, grunting. I held my breath, counting to 10. He settled back down. I lowered the top shoebox. It was a pair of Jordans he had bought last month. I lifted the lid. Inside there were no shoes. There was the vial. It was half empty, a clear, odorless liquid. I took it and slipped it into my pajama pocket. This was it. This was the proof. I could take this to a lab. I could save my life. But as I went to put the lid back on, I saw something else in the box underneath the tissue paper. It was a stack of plastic cards. I frowned. Why would Darius hide credit cards in a shoebox? I picked up the stack. The moonlight from the window hit the embossed letters. The first card was a platinum Visa. The name on it was Martha Johnson, my neighbor. I shuffled to the next card, a MasterCard. The name was Robert Miller. He was the old man who lived on the corner. He had died of a sudden stroke 6 months ago. At least that was what Darius had told everyone at the church. Darius had handled the sale of his house. I looked at the next one, Susan Higgins. She was the lady who ran the community garden. She had moved to Florida last year, or so we were told. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. There were 7 cards, 7 different names, 7 elderly people from this neighborhood, all of them clients of Darius Henderson Real Estate, all of them gone. I looked over at the bed where my son lay sleeping. He was not just a greedy child waiting for his father to die. He was a monster. He had been hunting in this neighborhood for years. He was clearing out the block one old person at a time, turning our blood into commissions and closing costs. I looked at the vial in my pocket. That was not just poison. That was the weapon that had killed Robert Miller. That was what had silenced Mrs. Higgins. And now it was my turn. I carefully put the cards back exactly as I found them. I placed the lid on the box and put it back on the shelf. I backed out of the room, my eyes fixed on the sleeping form of my son. I made it back to my room and locked the door. I leaned against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. I clutched the vial in my hand. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to cry. But there were no tears left. I looked at the monitor again. I saw the empty kitchen. I saw the trap I was living in. Calling the police was no longer enough. If I called them now, Darius might lawyer up. He might destroy evidence. He might blame Amber. He might get away with it. No, I needed more than just a vial. I needed to know where the bodies were. Because you don't just take people's credit cards and let them walk away. Robert Miller didn't have a stroke. Mrs. Higgins isn't in Florida. They are somewhere else. And I had a terrible feeling I knew where. Darius had told me strictly never to go into the basement because of the asbestos renovation. He had put a heavy-duty padlock on the cellar door last month. I looked at the time on my laptop. It was 4 a.m. The sun would be up in 2 hours. I had to move. I had to see what was in the basement before they woke up. Because if I was right about the cards, then I was living on top of a graveyard. The sun was coming up over Philadelphia, but it brought no warmth to my townhouse. I sat at my dining room table, surrounded by the hum of my servers and the glow of my laptop screen. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't care. I was looking at a digital graveyard. I had spent the last 3 hours digging into public property records. In the Army, they taught us that intel is the difference between an ambush and a victory. And the intel I was looking at now painted a picture of a war being fought right here on my block, a war I didn't even know I was losing. I pulled up the deed to Martha Johnson's house. She lived at 402, just 3 doors down. Martha was a widow like me. Her husband had worked at the shipyard. She used to sit on her porch and wave at everyone who walked by. Then one day the porch was empty. Darius told me she had moved to Arizona to be with her sister. The screen told a different story. The house hadn't been sold to a family. It had been sold for pennies on the dollar to a shell company called Apex Horizon LLC. The listing agent was Darius Henderson. The closing date was 2 days after Martha disappeared. I typed in Robert Miller's name. 408. The corner house. Same story. Sold to Apex Horizon LLC. Agent Darius Henderson. I typed in the names from the other credit cards I had seen in the shoebox. Susan Higgins. George Baker. One by one, the pattern emerged. Every single one of them was an elderly black homeowner on this street. Every single one of them had suddenly moved, died, or gone into a nursing home in the last 18 months. And every single one of their properties was now owned by the same shell company. I looked out the window. The neighborhood was changing. The old barber shop across the street was now a craft brewery. The corner store where I used to buy lottery tickets was a yoga studio. I always thought it was just the way of the world. Gentrification. The tide of money washing away the old to make way for the new. But this wasn't just economics. This was a purge. My son wasn't just a real estate agent. He was a cleaner. I needed to know who was behind Apex Horizon. I needed to see the endgame. I knew Darius kept his working files in his briefcase, and he usually left it in the home office on the second floor when he wasn't showing houses. He and Amber had left early this morning, claiming they had a brunch meeting with investors. I climbed the stairs. My joints popped and groaned. I wasn't the stealthy soldier I used to be, but I knew how to move with purpose. I slipped into the office. It was a sterile room decorated by Amber with abstract art and uncomfortable chairs. Darius's leather briefcase was sitting by the desk. I didn't pick the lock. I cut the leather side open with my pocket knife. I didn't care about hiding my tracks anymore. We were past that. Inside, there were no client wish lists or open house flyers. There was a blueprint, a massive architectural rendering of our city block. I spread it out on the desk. My hands were shaking. The map showed a massive luxury condominium complex called the Obsidian. It was a glass and steel monstrosity that would take up the entire block. A swimming pool on the roof, underground parking, valet service. And right in the middle of the blueprint was a red circle. My house. My home was the keystone. The structure couldn't be built without my lot. I was the hole in their donut, the only thing standing between them and a multi-million-dollar payday. Suddenly I heard the front door chime. The digital lock whirred. My heart slammed against my ribs. It was 11 in the morning. They weren't supposed to be back until 3. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor. Amber. I scrambled to fold the map. My fingers felt like sausages. I shoved it back into the ruined briefcase and turned it so the cut side faced the wall. But I was trapped. The office was at the top of the stairs. If I walked out now, she would see me. If I stayed, she would find me. "Honey, are you here?" Amber's voice drifted up the stairs. It wasn't her sweet fake voice. It was sharp, impatient. I looked around the room. No closet, just a sleek glass desk and a bookshelf. The footsteps were coming up the stairs. I dove behind the heavy velvet curtains that covered the bay window. I pressed my back against the cold glass, shrinking myself as small as I could. I held my breath, praying my old lungs wouldn't wheeze. Amber walked into the office. I could smell her perfume. It was expensive and overpowering, like rotting flowers. I heard the rustle of fabric as she sat down at the desk, then the sound of a phone dialing. "Yes, I am at the house," she said. Her voice was ice cold. "No, Darius is showing a property to a decoy client to keep up appearances. Listen, we have a problem with the timeline." Pause. "I know the demolition crew is scheduled for next month, but the old man is stubborn. His heart is stronger than we thought. The dosage Darius is using is too conservative. He is afraid of an autopsy." I squeezed my eyes shut. Hearing it confirmed was worse than suspecting it. My daughter-in-law was discussing my murder like it was a renovation delay. "Just tell the investors we are on track," Amber snapped. "I will handle it. If Darius doesn't have the stomach to finish it, I will double the dose tonight. He will go to sleep and just not wake up. A tragic heart failure in his sleep. Happens all the time at his age." She laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "Don't worry about the deed. Once he is gone, Darius gets power of attorney automatically as the only heir. We will sign the transfer to Apex Horizon the morning after the funeral." "Yes. Okay. Bye." She stood up. I heard her keys jingle. "I am going to grab the file and head to the lawyer," she muttered to herself. My heart stopped. The file. The briefcase. She was standing inches away from me, separated only by a layer of velvet. If she picked up that briefcase, she would see the slash in the leather. She would know. I gripped the handle of my pocket knife tight. I wasn't going to die behind a curtain. If she opened it, I would have to fight. I heard her hand touch the leather. Then her phone rang again. What now? She hissed, answering it. What? Darius, you idiot. You forgot the binder in the car. Fine. I am coming down. She stomped out of the room, leaving the briefcase on the desk. I waited until I heard the front door slam and the sound of her Porsche engine roaring to life. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. My shirt was soaked with sweat. They weren't just killing me for the insurance money, that was peanuts. They were killing me for the land. My house was the final piece of a puzzle worth millions. To them, I wasn't a father or a grandfather. I was an obstacle, a stubborn tree stump that needed to be dynamited so they could pour concrete. I stood up and looked out the window at Amber's car speeding away. The fear was gone. It had burned away in the heat of that moment behind the curtain. What was left was cold, hard clarity. They wanted a war. They wanted to wipe me off the map. They forgot one thing. I was a combat engineer. My job wasn't just building bridges, it was blowing them up. If they wanted my house, they could have it, but they weren't gonna like what they found inside. I walked out of the office and headed straight for the basement door. The padlock Darius had put on it was heavy-duty steel. He thought it would keep me out. He thought it would keep his secrets safe. I went to the garage and grabbed my bolt cutters. It was time to see what was buried under the foundation of my life. It was time to open the gates of hell. I sat in my recliner, the leather worn smooth by decades of Sunday afternoon naps, and prepared for the greatest performance of my life. In the Army, they taught us that camouflage is not just about painting your face green. It is about becoming part of the landscape. It is about making the enemy see exactly what they expect to see until it is too late. Darius and Amber expected to see a dying man. They expected to see a confused, senile old fool whose brain was melting under the influence of their poison. So that is exactly what I gave them. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I allowed a little bit of drool to gather at the corner of my lip. I made my hands shake not with the subtle tremor of age, but with the violent, unpredictable spasms of a nervous system in collapse. It hurt my pride more than any physical wound ever had. I was Grady Henderson. I had built skyscrapers. I had cleared minefields. To sit here and act like a helpless vegetable while these two vultures circled me was a torture I had not anticipated. But I had seen the blueprint in the briefcase. I knew the stakes. If I showed even a glimmer of strength, they would accelerate their timeline. They would skip the poison and move straight to a pillow over the face or a fall down the stairs. I had to buy time. I had to get into that basement. At 2 p.m, they made their move. Darius walked into the living room first. He was wearing his best suit, the navy blue one I had bought him for his graduation. He looked like success. He looked like trust. He was holding a folder and a glossy brochure. "Hey, Dad," Darius said, his voice thick with fake cheer. "Look who is here." Amber followed him in. She had changed out of her power suit into a soft floral dress. She was playing the part of the caring daughter-in-law. She sat on the ottoman right in front of me, her knees touching mine. I wanted to recoil. I wanted to kick her away, but I forced myself to sit still, to let my eyes drift unfocused past her shoulder. "We have great news," Dad Amber said, patting my knee. Her hand felt like a cold, dead weight. "We found a place for you. A beautiful place in Florida. Look." She held up the brochure. It showed palm trees, blue water, and smiling old people playing shuffleboard. It was called the Golden Horizon. It looked like paradise. I knew it was a lie. I knew there was no reservation. There was no plane ticket. The only horizon they were sending me to was the one 6 feet under. "It is warm there, Dad," Darius chimed in, sitting on the arm of my chair. "No more cold Philadelphia winters, no more stairs to climb. You will have your own room with a view of the ocean." I made a grunting noise, trying to struggle to form words. "Oh, ocean," I stammered. "Yes, Dad, the ocean." Amber smiled. "But to get you there, we need to handle some boring paperwork, just to make sure we can sell this old drafty house and pay for your new life." Darius opened the folder. Inside was a document. I recognized it immediately. A durable power of attorney. It would give Darius total control over my finances, my medical decisions, and my property. Once I signed this, I was legally dead while still breathing. Darius uncapped a pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. He placed it in my shaking hand. "Just sign right here, Dad." Amber pointed to the line at the bottom. Her fingernail was painted a deep blood red. Right here, and we can book your flight for Saturday. Saturday. That meant I had to be gone by Friday. I held the pen. I let the tip hover over the paper. I could feel their eyes on me. They were hungry. They were practically vibrating with anticipation. This was it. The moment they had been working towards for months. The poison, the gaslighting, the isolation. It all came down to this signature. I looked at the paper. I looked at Darius. I saw a bead of sweat roll down his temple. He was nervous. He knew this was the point of no return. I started to lower the pen. Amber leaned in closer, her perfume filling my nostrils, choking me. "That is it, Dad, just your name?" she whispered. I waited until the pen touched the paper. Then I triggered the spasm. I jerked my arm violently to the right. The heavy fountain pen flew out of my grip. But I did not just drop the pen. I flailed my other arm, the one resting on the side table next to my mug of lukewarm herbal tea. My hand struck the mug hard. Dark brown liquid exploded across the coffee table. It splashed onto Amber's floral dress. It soaked the power of attorney document, turning the crisp white paper into a soggy brown mess. The ink ran instantly, dissolving the legal terms into meaningless blurred lines. "Oh, for God's sake," Amber shrieked, jumping up. She forgot her character. She forgot the sweet daughter-in-law act. She looked at her dress, then at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You clumsy old fool," she hissed. Darius grabbed the document, trying to shake the tea off, but it was ruined. It was tearing in his hands. "It is okay. It is okay," Darius said, but his voice was tight. He was trying to salvage the situation. "It is just an accident, Amber. Calm down." "I am sick of this," Amber yelled. She grabbed a napkin and furiously dabbed at her dress. "Look at him, Darius. He is useless. He cannot even hold a pen. How are we supposed to get this done if he cannot write his own name?" I sat there slumped in the chair, breathing heavily, acting the part of the confused, frightened old man. "I am sorry," I mumbled. "My hands, they don't work." Darius looked at me. For a second I saw pity in his eyes. Just a flicker. But then he looked at Amber and the pity vanished, replaced by fear. He was more afraid of his wife than he was of losing his father. "We will print another copy," Darius said. "We will try again later when he is calmer." "No," Amber snapped. "We don't have time for later." "Look at the date, Darius. The investors want the deed transfer by Monday morning. That means we need this signed and notarized by Friday." She glared at me. Her eyes were hard like flint. "Clean him up," she ordered Darius. "I am going to change, and then we need to talk." She stormed out of the room. Darius looked at me one last time, shaking his head. "I will get a towel, Dad," he muttered. "Just stay there." I stayed there. I watched him clean up the mess. I watched him throw the ruined document into the trash. I had bought myself a few hours, maybe a day. But I had also escalated the war. That night they sent me to bed early. No dinner. Just another cup of that special warm milk. I took it with a trembling hand, thanked them, and then poured it into the potted fern in the corner of my room as soon as the door clicked shut. That fern was going to be dead by morning, but I intended to be alive. I locked my door. I wedged a chair under the handle just in case. Then I opened my laptop. The house was quiet, but on my screen the kitchen was a hive of activity. Darius and Amber were standing by the island. Amber was drinking wine straight from the bottle. Darius was pacing back and forth, his hands in his hair. "He is not going to sign it," Darius, Amber said. Her voice was coming through the hidden microphone, clear and sharp. "He is too far gone. Did you see him today? His brain is mush. He is my father." "Amber," Darius pleaded. "Maybe we can just forge the signature. I can trace it from an old check." "Too risky." Amber slammed the bottle down. "The bank verifies signatures on property transfers, especially for high-value lots like this. If they flag it, the whole deal collapses. And if the deal collapses, Apex Horizon sues us for breach of contract. We will go to jail, Darius. Do you want to go to jail?" Darius stopped pacing. "No," he whispered. "Then we need to accelerate the plan," Amber said. She reached into her purse and pulled out the vial. The clear liquid glinted under the kitchen lights. "We have been giving him the maintenance dose," she said. "Just enough to make him confused and weak. But he is a big man. He is tough. That stunt today with the tea proves he still has too much energy." She walked over to Darius and placed the vial in his hand. She closed his fingers around it. "Tonight we double it," she said. And tomorrow morning you give him a triple dose in his oatmeal." Darius looked at the vial. That could kill him, Amber. That is way past the toxic threshold." "That is the point," Amber said coldly. I watched on the screen as my son recoiled. "If he dies before he signs the power of attorney, we have to wait for probate," Darius stammered. "It takes months." "Not if he dies of natural causes and we are the sole heirs living in the house," Amber explained slowly as if talking to a child. I checked the laws. If he dies intestate, we inherit everything immediately as long as there are no other claims. The sale might be delayed by a week, but we still get the money. She stepped closer to him, running her hand down his chest. "But if he stays alive and keeps stalling, we lose everything. We lose the deal, we lose our house, we lose the lifestyle. Is that what you want? Do you want to go back to being a handyman's son?" Darius stared at the vial. I watched his face. I prayed to God, to anyone listening, that he would throw it against the wall, that he would slap her, that he would remember who I was. But he didn't. He gripped the vial tighter. "Okay," he whispered. "Friday," Amber said. "We need this done by Friday. Today is Tuesday. That gives us 3 days to clear the board." She kissed him. It was a kiss of death. "Finish the bottle," she said. "I am going to bed." I sat in the dark, my laptop screen glowing blue on my face. Friday. I had 72 hours. They were going to overdose me. They were going to stop the slow game and go for the kill. I looked at the date on my screen. It was Tuesday night. I could not wait for the police. I could not wait for a lab report. By the time any of that happened, I would be a corpse found in his bed, ruled as heart failure. I closed the laptop. My hands were steady now. The act was over. I needed to get into that basement. I needed to find the evidence that would put them away for life, and I needed to do it now. "Tonight the old man dies," I whispered to the darkness, "and the soldier comes back." I stood up and went to my closet. I pulled out my old army duffel bag. I reached to the bottom and felt the cold steel of my tire iron. It was time to go downstairs. The bolt cutters were heavy in my hands, cold steel that smelled of old grease in the garage. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring at the heavy-duty padlock Darius had installed 3 months ago. "Dad, do not go down there," Darius had said, his voice full of fake concern. "We found asbestos behind the drywall. And black mold. It is dangerous for your lungs. The contractors have sealed it off until we can get the hazmat team in." It was a good lie. It was plausible. At 73, my lungs were not what they used to be, and the word asbestos was enough to scare anyone from my generation. So I had obeyed. I had stayed upstairs, living my life on the surface while my son did God knows what in the underground. But now I knew that the only toxic thing in this house was my own flesh and blood. I positioned the jaws of the bolt cutters around the shackle. I took a deep breath, bracing my feet against the door frame. My arthritis flared in my knuckles, a sharp, hot pain, but I pushed through it. I squeezed the handles with everything I had, channeling every ounce of anger, every ounce of betrayal into my grip. Snap! The sound was loud, like a pistol shot in the quiet house. The lock fell to the floor with a heavy thud. I waited. Silence. The house was empty. Darius and Amber were at their meeting, showing off their fake smiles to real investors. I opened the door. I expected the smell of mold. I expected the damp, musty scent of a Philadelphia basement that had not been aired out in months. Instead, I smelled pine, fresh lumber, and something else, something chemical and sterile like a hospital operating room. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. He had cut the main power to the bulbs. I pulled out my flashlight, the tactical one I kept in my nightstand, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness as I descended the stairs. The stairs were new. That was the first thing I noticed. The old creaky wooden steps I had built 40 years ago were gone, replaced by solid rubberized treads, silent. You could walk up and down these stairs without making a whisper. Why would you build silent stairs for a room full of mold? I reached the bottom and swung the light around. The basement was gone. The space where I used to keep my holiday decorations and my old tools was unrecognizable. Darius had built a room within a room. False walls went from floor to ceiling, shrinking the space by half. The drywall was new, perfectly taped and mudded. There was a door in the center of the wall. It was not a normal interior door. It was heavy solid core with a rubber seal around the edges. Soundproofing. He had built a soundproof chamber under my feet. I pushed the door open. It swung on heavy oiled hinges. I stepped inside and the silence was absolute. It sucked the air out of my ears. The walls were lined with acoustic foam, the kind they use in recording studios. Gray, jagged foam that absorbed every noise. You could scream in here until your throat bled and no one upstairs would hear a thing. In the center of the room was a large workbench. It was impeccably clean. Surgical. But it was the far wall that made me stop breathing. It was covered in a large corkboard. On the board was a map of our neighborhood blown up to poster size. My flashlight beam danced across the map. I saw the familiar grid of streets. Pine Street, Cedar Avenue, Market Street. There were photos pinned to specific lots, photos of houses. I stepped closer, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I recognized the house at the top left. It was a blue Victorian with a wraparound porch. That was Mrs. Higgins' house. A thick red X was drawn across the photo in marker. Next to it was a photo of Mr. Miller's brick row house. Red X. I moved the light down the line. Martha Johnson's house. The sweet lady who made peach cobbler. Red X. There were 9 houses in total. 9 of my neighbors. 9 people I had known for decades. People I had barbecued with. People whose children had played with Darius. All of them had red X's over their homes, and right in the center of the map was my house. There was no X yet, just a circle. A red circle drawn so hard the marker had torn through the paper. I was the final project. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This was not just real estate fraud. This was not just a scam. This was a hunting ground. Darius was not just selling houses, he was clearing the board. I turned away from the map, unable to look at it anymore. My light fell on the workbench. There was a singular object sitting in the middle of the table. It was an old wooden ammunition crate, Army surplus. I remembered buying that crate at a flea market 10 years ago to store nuts and bolts. Now it sat there polished and centered like an altar. I walked over to it. My hands were trembling so bad the flashlight beam was jumping all over the walls. I did not want to open it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run upstairs, to call the police and leave this house forever. But I had to know. I had to know the depth of the rot. I unlatched the metal clasps. They clicked softly in the dead silence. I lifted the heavy wooden lid. The smell of old metal and lavender hit me. I shined the light inside. It was not money. It was not deeds. It was not drugs. It was a collection. Lying on a bed of black velvet were small, clear plastic bags. I picked up the first one. Inside was a gold wedding band, thick, worn, heavy. I turned it over in the plastic. There was an inscription inside. Eternally yours, 1968. I knew that ring. I had seen it on Mr. Miller's finger every day for 30 years. He never took it off even after his wife died. He used to rub it with his thumb when he was thinking. I dropped the bag back into the box like it was burning hot. I picked up another one, a pearl brooch, a cheap costume jewelry piece, but one that Mrs. Higgins wore to church every single Sunday. She called it her good luck charm. I picked up another, a pair of thick-rimmed eyeglasses. One lens was cracked, and then I saw the bag in the corner. It was smaller than the others. Inside was a gold tooth, a molar, with the root still attached, dry and brown. I gagged. I had to lean against the workbench to keep from falling. This was not just murder for profit. This was trophy-taking. Darius was not just killing them to sell their houses. He was keeping pieces of them. He was taking their most personal possessions, things they would never willingly give up, and storing them in this box like prizes from a carnival game. I stared at the gold tooth. I realized with a sick horror that you don't get a tooth like that out of a body peacefully. You don't get that from a stroke victim or a heart attack case. You have to pull it. The soundproof room, the surgical table, the privacy. He didn't just poison them. The images flooded my mind. My son, my little boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, down here in the dark, with pliers, with Mrs. Higgins, with Mr. Miller. They hadn't just died. They had suffered, and he had kept the souvenirs. I looked back at the map, at the red circle around my house. He didn't just want the deed. He wanted my ring. He wanted my watch. He wanted to put a piece of me in this box to complete his set. I was not his father. I was the final boss in his sick game. I heard a noise. Thump. It came from upstairs. The front door closing. They were home. Early. I clicked off the flashlight. The darkness rushed back in, suffocating and total. I stood there in the silence, holding my breath, clutching the edge of the workbench. I was trapped in a soundproof box with the evidence of 9 murders, and the monster was walking around right above my head. I heard muffled footsteps on the floorboards above, then silence, then the sound of the basement doorknob turning. It was locked. I had not put the lock back on. I had left the broken padlock on the floor at the top of the stairs. They knew. I heard Darius's voice muffled but audible through the ceiling vents. "Amber, call the police. Tell them Dad has gone crazy. Tell them he has a weapon." I stood in the dark and gripped the tire iron I had tucked into my belt. Let them come. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the combat engineer, and I was standing in the middle of the enemy's ammunition dump. If I was going down, I was taking this whole house of horrors with me. I stood in the darkness of the basement, clutching the tire iron so hard my knuckles turned white. I waited for the door to burst open. I waited for the light to flood in and for the final confrontation to begin. But the door remained shut. Instead, I heard heavy footsteps stomping across the floorboards above my head. They were in the kitchen, directly over the secret room. The soundproofing in the walls was excellent, but the ventilation ducts were old metal pipes that carried sound like a telephone wire. I heard shouting, "I cannot do it, Amber. I cannot go down there." That was Darius. His voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysteria. "You are going down there, and you are going to check the lock, Darius." That was Amber. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the ceiling like a razor blade. I realized they had not seen the broken padlock yet. They had come home, saw my car in the driveway, saw the lights off, and assumed the worst. They were arguing about who had to go check on the prisoner. This was my chance. I knew the layout of this house better than anyone. There was a small service chute behind the furnace that led up to the utility closet in the hallway. It was tight, meant for laundry, but I was leaner than I used to be. I scrambled up the chute, ignoring the pain in my knees, dragging my body through the dust and cobwebs. I emerged into the hallway closet, silent as a shadow. I could hear them in the kitchen just 10 feet away. I did not confront them. Not yet. I needed to see exactly what I was dealing with. I slipped into my bedroom and locked the door, engaging the deadbolt I had secretly installed days ago. I sat at my desk and woke up the laptop. The screen flickered to life. The kitchen feed was crystal clear. What I saw on that screen chilled me more than the collection of teeth in the basement. For years I had told myself that Darius was a victim of bad influence. I told myself he was weak, that he followed the wrong crowd. I blamed society. I blamed myself for working too much. But looking at the screen, I saw the truth. Darius was pacing the kitchen, wringing his hands. He looked terrified. He looked like a child who had broken a vase. But Amber was sitting on the granite countertop, swinging her legs casually. She was drinking a glass of red wine. Her face was calm. There was no fear in her eyes, only annoyance. She was not an accomplice. She was not a supportive wife helping her husband out of a jam. She was the architect. "Look at me," Darius, Amber said, putting down her wine glass. "Stop pacing. You are making me dizzy." "I cannot do this anymore," Darius stammered. He leaned against the sink, gasping for air. "Dad." He looked at me today. When I gave him the paper, he looked at me like he knew. And now the basement. If he found out about the basement. So what if he knows? Amber shrugged. Who is he going to tell? The police. You think they will believe a senile old black man over a white woman with a law degree and a clean record? We own the narrative, Darius. We always have. She hopped off the counter and walked toward him. She moved like a cat stalking a wounded bird. "We stick to the plan," she said. "Tonight you go downstairs. You give him the injection. We tell the coroner he had a stroke. It is clean. It is simple." "No," Darius yelled. He slammed his hand on the counter. "No injections. No more bodies. I am done, Amber. I want out. We sell the house as is. We take less money. I don't care. I am not killing my own father." The silence that followed was heavy. I leaned closer to the screen, watching Amber's reaction. She did not scream. She did not cry. She laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. She walked up to Darius until she was inches from his face. She reached up and adjusted his tie, smoothing the silk with her manicured fingers. "You are done," she whispered. "You want out." She stepped back. Then, without warning, she swung her arm. Smack! The sound of the slap echoed through my laptop speakers. It was vicious. Darius's head snapped to the side. He stumbled back, holding his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. "You don't get to be done," Amber hissed. Her face twisted into a snarl that made her look demonic. "You think this is a game? You think you can just walk away?" She advanced on him, poking a finger hard into his chest, pushing him back against the refrigerator. "Who found the buyers, Darius?" "Me." "Who set up the shell company so your name would not appear on the deeds?" "Me." "Who told you which houses to target because I knew which old folks had no family to check on them?" "Me." Darius cowered. He looked small. "I just wanted to be rich," Darius whined. "I did not want this." "You wanted the cars," Amber spat. "You wanted the suits. You wanted to walk into that country club and pretend you belonged." "Well, this is the price of admission, honey. Blood." She grabbed him by the lapels of his jacket and shook him. "You are going to kill that old man tonight, and you know why." Darius shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Because if you don't," Amber said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "I will make a phone call. I will call the detectives who are still looking into Martha Johnson's disappearance, and I will tell them exactly where to dig." Darius froze. "I kept the receipts." Darius Amber smiled a cruel, victorious smile. "I have the videos of you entering her house. I have the gloves you wore with her DNA on them. I kept them in a safety deposit box that only I can access." Darius stared at her in horror. You recorded me." "Insurance policy, darling," Amber said, patting his bruised cheek. "Just in case you ever got cold feet. Like now." She stepped back and took a sip of her wine. "So here's how it works. You go downstairs, you finish the job, we get the money, we go to Europe, and we live happily ever after. Or, I make that call. I play the grieving wife who discovered her husband is a serial killer. I get a plea deal, and you get the electric chair." She looked him up and down with disgust. "Your choice. Do you want to be a wealthy widow's husband, or do you want to be the monster of Philadelphia on the evening news?" Darius slid down the refrigerator door until he was sitting on the floor. He buried his face in his hands. He was sobbing. Not out of remorse for the lives he had taken, but out of self-preservation. He was trapped. "I will do it," he whispered. "Good boy," Amber said. She finished her wine and set the glass in the sink. "Now stop crying. Go get the kit. I will keep watch upstairs." I sat back in my chair. My heart was pounding, but my mind was icy clear. For months I had directed my anger at Darius. I thought he was the one betraying me. I thought he was the wolf in the fold. But he was just a dog, a vicious, obedient dog on a very short leash. Amber was the handler. She was the one who had scouted the neighborhood. She was the one who had targeted us. She saw a community of proud, hardworking black homeowners and saw nothing but prey. She saw Darius not as a husband, but as a tool, a weapon she could wield to carve out her fortune without getting her own hands dirty. She was a parasite. She had latched onto my son, fed on his insecurity, fed on his greed, and turned him into a monster. And now she was coming for me. I looked at the screen one last time. Darius was standing up, wiping his face. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He opened the drawer and pulled out a black medical case. Amber was checking her reflection in the microwave door, fixing her hair. They were coming. I closed the laptop. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt a strange sense of calm. The confusion was gone. I knew exactly who my enemy was. I picked up the tire iron from my desk. Darius was coming to kill his father, but he was going to find a soldier waiting for him. And Amber, the puppet master, the woman who thought she could pull the strings and watch the show from a safe distance. She was about to find out that when you pull on a string, sometimes you bring the whole ceiling down on your head. I unlocked my bedroom door and stepped out into the dark hallway. I did not go downstairs. I went to the top of the stairs and waited in the shadows. I was not going to hide in the basement. I was going to take the high ground. "Come on, son," I whispered into the darkness. "Come and take your inheritance." The doorbell rang. It was a sharp mechanical sound that cut through the suffocating silence of the house like a mortar round. I was standing at the top of the stairs, clutching my tire iron, ready for war, but the sound froze me. Who would come here at 6 in the evening on a Tuesday? I retreated into the shadows of the hallway and pulled out my phone to check the front door camera feed. My heart leaped into my throat. Standing on the porch was a mountain of a man in a beige trench coat and a fedora that had seen better days. It was Raymond Carter. We called him Bulldog back in the engineer corps. He was 6'4", 250 pounds of gristle and bad attitude. After the war, he became a private investigator specializing in insurance fraud. He had a nose for lies that was better than a bloodhound. We met for chess every Thursday at the park. I had missed last week because of the poison making me too weak to leave the house. He knew. He must have known. Raymond did not make house calls unless he smelled trouble. I watched on the screen as he pressed the doorbell again. He did not press it politely. He held his thumb on the button, listening to the chime echo inside. He looked at the camera lens. His eyes narrowed. He knew I had cameras. He was signaling me. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor downstairs. Amber. She was moving fast. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothed her dress, and put on that terrifying plastic smile. She opened the door. I crept closer to the banisters, straining to hear. "Hi, can I help you?" Amber chirped. Her voice was light, bubbly, the perfect hostess. "I am here to see—" "Grady," Raymond rumbled. His voice was deep, gravelly. It sounded like safety. It sounded like salvation. "Oh, I am so sorry," Amber said, blocking the doorway with her body. "Dad is not feeling well today. He had a bad reaction to some medication. He is sleeping right now." I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell liar down the stairs. But my voice was raspy from the stress, and the house was large. If I yelled, she would just tell him I was delirious. I needed to do something undeniable. Raymond did not move. He did not smile back. "I called him yesterday," Raymond said. "He did not answer. I called him today. Straight to voicemail. Grady does not let his phone die. And he does not miss chess." "He is very old," Sir Amber said, her voice dropping a few degrees, losing some of its warmth. "He gets confused. We are taking good care of him." "I am sure you are," Raymond said, stepping closer. He loomed over her. "But I drove 40 minutes to get here. I am not leaving until I see him. Just for a minute. I want to see he is okay with my own eyes." I could see Amber's posture stiffen. She was cornered. A man like Raymond did not take no for an answer. He was not a polite dinner guest she could manipulate. He was a tank. "You cannot come in," Amber said coldly. "It is late. We are having a private family evening. You are trespassing." "I am not trespassing until you ask me to leave," Raymond countered. "And if you ask me to leave without letting me check on my friend, I am going to sit in my car at the end of the driveway and call the precinct captain. I used to work with him. I will ask for a welfare check. Do you want a squad car pulling up here tonight, ma'am?" My heart soared. Good old bulldog. He was pushing her. He was threatening her with the one thing she feared most: exposure. Amber hesitated. I saw her hand grip the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. She was calculating. If she let him in and he saw me, saw the fear in my eyes, saw the tire iron in my hand, it was over. But if she refused, the police would be here in 20 minutes. I needed to tip the scales. I needed to give Raymond a reason to push past her. I ran back into my bedroom. The window faced the street. It was directly above the porch. If I could smash it, if I could throw something down onto the driveway, Raymond would know. He would know I was fighting. I scanned the room. My eyes landed on the heavy crystal water pitcher on my nightstand. It was thick lead crystal, a wedding gift from Beatrice's mother. It weighed 5 pounds. Perfect. I grabbed it. Water sloshed onto my hand. I rushed to the window. Downstairs, the argument was escalating. "I am giving you 3 seconds to step aside," Raymond growled. I grabbed the heavy velvet curtains and ripped them open. The streetlights flooded the room. I saw the top of Raymond's head down on the porch. I saw his beat-up sedan parked at the curb. I raised the pitcher over my head. My shoulders screamed in protest, but I didn't care. I swung it with every ounce of strength I had left. Smash! The pitcher hit the glass pane. The window shattered. Shards of glass exploded outward, raining down onto the porch roof and the driveway. The sound was deafening, a jagged crash that tore through the quiet neighborhood. Raymond looked up. I saw his face. He saw me. He saw me standing in the broken window, waving my arms, mouthing the word, "Help." "Grady," he shouted. He lunged forward, shoving Amber aside. He was coming in. I sagged against the wall, relief washing over me. He saw me. It was over. But I underestimated Amber. She did not fall when he shoved her. She stumbled back, bounced off the wall, and hit the smart home control panel mounted by the door. She slammed her palm against the party mode button. Instantly, the house erupted. Bass-heavy trap music blasted from the ceiling speakers at maximum volume. The floorboards vibrated. The sound was so loud it was disorienting. It shook the pictures on the walls. It drowned out my screams. It drowned out Raymond's shouting. Then she hit the lockdown button. The magnetic locks on the front door slammed shut. The security shutters on the downstairs windows rolled down with a metallic clang. I watched from my window as Raymond hammered on the front door. He was shouting, but I could not hear him over the thumping bass. He tried to kick the door, but it was solid oak reinforced with steel. Then I saw Amber running. She was not running away. She was running up the stairs. I turned around. I raised my tire iron, but I was slow. Too slow. Amber burst into the room. She did not look like a socialite anymore. Her hair was wild, her eyes were manic. In her hand she held a syringe. She did not hesitate. She did not monologue. She launched herself at me like a wild animal. I swung the tire iron, but she ducked. She was 30 years younger than me. She was fast. She slammed into my chest, tackling me onto the bed. The wind was knocked out of me. I gasped, trying to push her off, but she was strong, desperate strength. She pinned my left arm down with her knee. "Raymond is calling the cops," I wheezed, spitting in her face. "It is over. It is over when I say it is over," she screamed. She jammed the needle into my shoulder. She did not look for a vein. She just stabbed it into the muscle right through my shirt. I felt the cold burn of the liquid entering my body. I roared in pain and bucked my hips, throwing her off. She stumbled back, dropping the empty syringe on the carpet. I tried to stand up. I grabbed the bedpost, but the room tilted. The walls began to melt. Whatever was in that syringe was fast-acting, much faster than the poison. It hit my brain like a sledgehammer. My knees buckled. I slumped to the floor. The music seemed to slow down. The bass became a dull thumping like a dying heart. I looked up. Amber was standing over me. She was breathing hard, smoothing her dress. She walked over to the window and calmly pulled the blackout shades down, hiding me from the world. Down on the street, I could see the flashing lights of Raymond's car as he sped off, presumably to get help. But he would be too late. Amber knelt beside me. Her face was blurry, swimming in and out of focus. She patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. "Sleep now, you annoying old man," she whispered. Her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "By the time your friend comes back with a warrant, you will be cold. And I will be the grieving daughter-in-law who found you dead of a stroke." I tried to speak. I tried to say her name, but my tongue was a dead weight in my mouth. Darkness encroached from the edges of my vision, turning the world into a narrow tunnel. The last thing I saw was Amber picking up the tire iron. She smiled. "I will put this back in the garage," she said. "We don't want the police to think there was a struggle." Then everything went black. Consciousness returned to me in jagged shards. First came the smell. It was the sterile scent of rubbing alcohol mixed with the stale odor of my own sweat. Then came the sound. A low, rhythmic beeping like a hospital monitor, but I knew I was not in a hospital. I was in my own bed. The mattress felt familiar. The groove where my body had slept for 30 years was still there, but something was wrong. I tried to lift my hand to rub the ache in my temples, but my hand did not move. I tugged harder. Leather bit into my skin. I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit only by the street lamp filtering through the heavy blackout curtains Amber had pulled down. I looked at my wrists. They were strapped to the bedposts with thick leather restraints, not medical restraints. These were belts. My own belts taken from my closet, looped and buckled tight enough to cut off circulation. I tried to kick my legs, bound at the ankles. I was spread eagled on my own marriage bed, trussed up like a pig waiting for the butcher. The door creaked open. A sliver of hallway light cut across the room, blinding me for a second. Darius walked in. He was holding a glass of water and a wet washcloth. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shirt was wrinkled, and he smelled of scotch. "Dad," he whispered, "you are awake." I stared at him. I did not speak. I let the silence hang between us, heavy and accusing. "I am sorry about the restraints," Darius said, avoiding my eyes. He began to wipe my forehead with the cool cloth. You had a bad episode, Dad. You were violent. You were screaming about the war, about enemies in the basement. You tried to attack Amber with a tire iron. We had to restrain you for your own safety." "Liar," I croaked. My throat was dry as sandpaper. Darius flinched. He pulled the cloth away. The doctor came. He continued reciting the script Amber must have written for him. "He gave you a sedative. He said you have late-stage dementia with paranoid delusions. He said it is dangerous to move you right now. So we are going to keep you here comfortable until the facility can take you on Friday." Friday. 2 days away. They were not waiting for Friday. Friday was just the story they told themselves to sleep at night. I knew I would be dead by sunrise. "Untie me," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "I can't," Darius said, stepping back. He put the water glass on the nightstand just out of my reach. "A cruel little torture. Not yet. You are still unstable. Just rest, Dad. Please, just make this easy. Make this easy." That was what he wanted. He wanted me to fade away quietly so he wouldn't have to feel the guilt of watching me struggle. He wanted to inherit my house without inheriting the memory of my murder. He walked to the door. "I am going to be right outside," he said. "If you need anything, just call out. But don't try to get loose. Those knots are tight." He closed the door. The lock clicked. I lay there in the dark, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hall. I heard the murmur of Amber's voice, then silence. I looked at the leather strap binding my right wrist. It was my Sunday belt, the black leather one Beatrice had bought me for our 25th anniversary. It was good leather, strong. Darius had buckled it on the last hole tight against the bone. He thought I was helpless. He saw an old man with arthritis and a heart condition. He forgot he was looking at Sergeant Grady Henderson. My mind drifted back. 50 years ago, the Mekong Delta. I had been separated from my platoon during a night patrol. The Viet Cong had dug a tiger trap lined with bamboo spikes. I didn't fall on the spikes, but the fall knocked me out. When I woke up, I was in a cage made of bamboo and rattan submerged halfway in muddy water. My hands were tied behind my back with wet hemp rope. The guard was smoking a cigarette 10 feet away. He thought the rope was tight. He didn't know that rope expands when it dries but shrinks when it is wet. It was cutting into my wrists, making my hands numb. I didn't panic then. Panic burns oxygen. Panic makes you thrash and tighten the knots. I stayed still. I breathed. I focused on the anatomy of my own hand. The human hand is a marvel of engineering, but it has a flaw. The thumb joint. It is a ball and socket, but it is held in place by ligaments that can be stretched. If you can tuck your thumb into your palm and compress the metacarpal, you can slide your hand out of almost anything, but the leather belt was rigid. It would not stretch like wet hemp. To get out of this, I would have to break the rule of physics. Or I would have to break myself. I looked at my right hand. The thumb was swollen from the tightness of the strap. I needed lubrication. I turned my head and spat onto my own shoulder, trying to get saliva onto my wrist. It wasn't enough. I began to rub my wrist violently against the leather, not to escape, but to create friction, to create sweat. Pain shot up my arm. Good. Pain was fuel. I worked for 10 minutes until my skin was raw and slick with sweat and blood. Now came the hard part. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes and visualized the bone structure of my thumb. I needed to dislocate the basal joint. I needed to push my thumb down into my palm until it folded flat against the other fingers, making my hand narrow enough to slip through the loop. I pushed. The pain was blinding, white hot, and immediate. It felt like a nail was being driven into the base of my thumb. My body wanted to stop. My reflexes screamed at me to relax the hand. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought they would crack. "Do it, soldier," I whispered to myself. "Do it or die here like a dog." I pushed harder. I braced my thumb against the mattress and shoved my weight against it. Pop! A sickening wet crunch echoed in the quiet room. My thumb joint slipped out of its socket. The pain was so intense my vision went black for a second. I gasped, choking back a scream. Tears streamed down my face. My thumb was now limp, folded unnaturally into my palm. My hand was narrower now. I pulled. The leather scraped against the raw skin. It caught on the knuckle. I pulled harder, ignoring the agony of the dislocated joint grinding against the belt. Slide. Slide. With a wet squelch, my hand came free. I lay there panting, clutching my right hand to my chest. It was throbbing with a pulse of its own. It looked deformed purple and angry. I didn't have time to baby it. I had to reset it. I grabbed my right thumb with my left hand. I bit down on the pillowcase to muffle the sound. 1, 2, 3. I yanked it back into place. The snap was louder this time. The pain washed over me again, causing a wave of nausea, but the joint was back. I wiggled it. It was stiff, swollen, and weak, but it worked. I sat up. I undid the other straps with my free hand. My legs were stiff but functional. I stood up next to the bed. I was lightheaded. The sedative was still in my system, making the floor feel like it was tilting. I steadied myself against the wall. I went to the door, locked from the outside. I went to the window. I peeked through the side of the shade. We were on the second floor, a 20-foot drop to the concrete driveway. In my prime, I could have made that jump. Now with bad knees and a drugged head, it would mean broken legs, and a broken leg meant capture. I looked around the room. My eyes landed on the vent in the ceiling. No too small. I could try to break the door down. But the noise would bring Darius and Amber running. Amber had a gun. I had seen the syringe I knew she was willing to kill. If I charged out there unarmed, I was dead. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was disheveled, my eyes were wild, my shirt was torn. I looked like a victim. No. I straightened my back. I wiped the blood from my wrist. I was not leaving. This was my house. I bought the land. I poured the foundation. I framed the walls. I ran the wires. I knew every crawl space, every loose board, every circuit breaker. They thought they had trapped me in a prison, but they didn't understand. They were trapped in here with me. I walked over to the closet. I reached to the top shelf behind the winter coats. My hand closed around a heavy canvas bag, my old toolkit, the one I kept in the bedroom for emergencies. Hammer, screwdrivers, a roll of high-tension wire, a box of long nails, and a can of industrial adhesive. I opened the bag. The tools clinked softly, the sound of music. I looked at the bedroom door. It was a solid wood door. Darius was standing guard on the other side, probably scrolling through his phone, waiting for me to die. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to jump out the window and limp to the police station while they destroyed the evidence. I was going to turn 422 Maple Street into a fortress. I picked up the hammer. It felt heavy and righteous in my hand. I am the master builder, I whispered, and tonight I am ordering a demolition. I moved the heavy dresser, silently blocking the door. That would buy me 5 minutes when they tried to enter. 5 minutes was all I needed to set the first trap. I looked at the floorboards near the window. I knew the joists underneath were accessible if I pried up the carpet. I looked at the electrical outlet near the bed. 120 volts of alternating current. A plan formed in my mind. It was brutal. It was dangerous. It was necessary. I knelt down, ignoring the pain in my knees, and began to pry up the carpet tacks. You want my house, Darius, I thought as I stripped the insulation off a live wire. You can have it, but you are going to have to walk through hell to get the deed. I waited until the digital clock on the nightstand blinked 3 in the morning. The house was silent, a tomb built of brick and mortar, but tonight it was going to become a machine. I had spent the last hour mentally rehearsing every movement. In the engineer corps, we drilled until our hands could strip a rifle in the dark. Tonight, I was stripping my own home. I sat up on the edge of the bed. My right thumb throbbed a dull ache that shot up to my elbow every time I moved it, but the adrenaline kept the pain at a distance. I checked the hallway through the crack in the door. Empty. The faint blue glow of the security panel illuminated the landing. Darius and Amber were asleep downstairs in the guest suite, the master bedroom of their future empire. They felt safe. They thought the old man was strapped to the bed, drooling into his pillow. They were wrong. I picked up my canvas tool bag. It was heavy, but silence was more important than weight. I moved the dresser away from the door, inches at a time, lifting it so the legs would not scrape against the floor. I slipped out into the hallway. The air was cold. My first target was the kitchen. I moved down the stairs, hugging the wall where the supports were strongest and the wood was less likely to groan. I reached the bottom floor and froze. A shadow moved across the refrigerator door. I gripped my hammer tight. But it was just a tree branch swaying outside the window, casting its silhouette against the stainless steel. I exhaled and stepped into the kitchen. It smelled of the dinner I had missed: roast chicken and rosemary. On the granite island stood a bottle of expensive Merlot, half empty. Next to it was Darius's medical kit, left out in his arrogance. I opened the kit. There it was, the vial. I held it up to the moonlight. Clear, odorless death. I walked to the sink and poured it down the drain. I turned on the tap, just a trickle, washing the poison away. Then I filled the vial with tap water. I capped it and put it back exactly where I found it. If they tried to force feed me again, they would only be hydrating me. But defense was not enough. I needed offense. I looked at the wine bottle. Darius and Amber loved their wine. They drank a bottle every night to celebrate their cleverness. I reached into my tool bag and pulled out a small rusted tin. It was not a tool. It was a remnant from my gardening days. Years ago, I had grown Jimson weed, also known as devil's snare, in the backyard to keep the pests away from my tomatoes. I had harvested the seeds, intending to replant them, but never did. These seeds contained a potent mix of alkaloids. In high doses, they caused delirium, hallucinations, and terror. In the old days, soldiers used them to incapacitate enemies without firing a shot. I took a handful of the dried black seeds. I crushed them into a fine powder using the back of a spoon and a ceramic bowl. I worked methodically, grinding them until they were dust. I poured the powder into the open bottle of Merlot. I swirled it gently until the sediment dissolved into the deep red liquid. "Drink up, children," I whispered. Next was the battlefield prep. I walked to the main staircase. These stairs were the spine of the house. Darius would use them to come get me in the morning, or if things went wrong, he would use them to chase me. I knelt on the fourth step from the top. I took out my pry bar. It was wrapped in cloth to dampen the sound. I wedged it under the oak tread. I applied pressure. The wood resisted, then gave with a soft pop. I lifted the tread just enough to expose the stringer underneath. I used my pliers to pull the nails out one by one. They squeaked a sound that made my skin crawl, but the house remained silent. I did not remove the tread completely. That would be too obvious. I set it back down, resting it on the edge of the riser. To the naked eye, it looked solid. But if a 200-pound man stepped on it with his full weight, the wood would flip forward, sending him tumbling down the rest of the flight. I did the same to the seventh step, a double tap. I moved to the living room. The crystal chandelier hung above the entryway, a massive brass fixture that weighed over 50 pounds. It was directly above the spot where Amber usually stood to check her makeup in the hall mirror. I dragged the dining table over to the center of the room. I placed a chair on top of it. I climbed up, wincing as my bad knee took the weight. I reached the chain mechanism. It was held by a heavy steel carabiner hook screwed into the ceiling joist. I took out my wrench. I loosened the nut on the carabiner. I turned it until it was holding on by a single thread. One good vibration, one slam of a door, or a well-aimed throw of a shoe would bring the whole thing crashing down. I climbed down and put the furniture back exactly as it was. My breathing was heavy now. Sweat soaked my back. I checked the time. 4:15. I had less than 2 hours before the sun came up. I had one last job. I went back up to the bedroom. I had to make it look like I had never left. I moved the dresser back in front of the door, leaving just enough room to squeeze through, then pulling it flush with a wire loop I had improvised. I sat on the bed. This was the hardest part. I had to tie myself up. I lay down on the mattress. I strapped my ankles first, pulling the belts as tight as I could tolerate. Then the left wrist. I buckled it to the bedpost using my teeth to pull the strap tight. Now the right hand. The hand with the dislocated thumb. I couldn't buckle it tight, not with one hand. So I used a magician's trick. I looped the belt around my wrist and the bedpost, creating a friction knot. It looked tight. If you pulled on it casually, it would hold. But if I twisted my wrist and pulled the hidden tail of the belt, the whole knot would unravel in a second. I lay back and closed my eyes. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The pain in my thumb was a dull roar now, but I welcomed it. It kept me sharp. I waited. I waited for the sun. I waited for the footsteps. At 7:00 I heard them. Darius came up the stairs first. I heard his heavy tread on the floorboards. He stepped over the trapped stair. Lucky. He unlocked the door. He walked in holding a tray with a bowl of oatmeal and a glass of juice. He looked exhausted. He had bags under his eyes. "Good morning, Dad," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I stared at him. I put on my best performance. I let my eyes drift around the room as if I was seeing ghosts. Who are you?" I mumbled. "It is Darius, Dad. Your son." "I don't have a son," I whispered. "My son died in the war. You are the tax man." Darius sighed. He set the tray down. "Eat up," he said. "You have a big day today." He didn't know. He didn't know that the wine he would drink tonight was spiked. He didn't know that the stairs he just walked up were a death trap. He didn't know that the poison in his pocket was water. He thought he was the jailer. He didn't realize he was walking into the execution chamber. I watched him leave. As the door clicked shut, I flexed my right hand. The knot held, but it was ready to release. I looked at the oatmeal. I didn't eat it. I dumped it into the potted plant. Tonight we dine in hell, Darius, I thought. And you are the main course. The smell of seared steak drifted up the stairs, slipping under my bedroom door like a taunt. I lay on my bed in the dark, fully dressed, my boots laced tight, listening to the sounds of their celebration. I could hear the clinking of expensive silverware against china. I could hear the pop of a cork. It was the bottle of Merlot, the bottle I had prepared with the seeds of the devil's snare. Downstairs, Darius and Amber were toasting to their future. They were toasting to the money they would make once the old man was finally out of the way. They thought I was strapped to the bed, drifting into a coma. They did not know that the old man was wide awake. They did not know that I was not the one who was going to have a bad trip tonight. I checked my watch, 7:45. They had been eating for 20 minutes. The alkaloids in the Jimson weed are fast, but they are not instant. First comes the thirst, then the heat, then the madness. I sat up and walked quietly to the door. I moved the dresser aside silently, my muscles burning with the effort. I pressed my ear to the wood. "Is it too hot in here?" Darius's voice drifted up. It sounded thick, slurred. "It is 70 degrees, Darius," Amber replied. Her voice was crisp, annoyed. "Stop complaining. This is a $50 bottle of wine. Appreciate it." "I am burning up," Darius groaned. I heard a chair scrape against the floor. "I need water. My mouth. It feels like sand." "Drink more wine," Amber laughed. "It will help you relax. You are just nervous about tomorrow. Don't be. By noon he will be gone and we will be rich." I heard the sound of liquid being poured into a glass. "Drink up, son. Drink deep." I unlocked my door. The click was soft, masked by the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I picked up the shotgun from under the bed. It was a Remington 870 Wingmaster. I had bought it 30 years ago for duck hunting. I had removed the firing pin years ago when the grandkids came to visit, so it was technically useless as a firearm. But in the dark, with the pump action slid forward, it looked like the wrath of God. I crept out into the hallway. I stood at the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows. From my vantage point, I could see part of the dining room. Darius was tugging at his collar. His face was flushed a deep, unhealthy red. Sweat was pouring down his forehead, dripping onto his pristine white shirt. Amber looked at him and frowned. "Darius, you are soaking wet. What is wrong with you?" "I don't know," Darius mumbled. He stood up, swaying on his feet. "The room. Why is the room breathing amber?" "Sit down, you idiot," Amber snapped. "You are having a panic attack. Pull yourself together." "No, look." Darius pointed a shaking finger at the wall. "The wallpaper. It is moving. There are bugs under it. Thousands of bugs." He began to scratch his arms violently, digging his nails into his skin. "Get them off! Get them off me." The drug had hit the psychoactive stage. The devil's snare does not just make you sick. It strips away the filter between your subconscious and your reality. It takes your deepest fears and projects them onto the world. And Darius's deepest fear was guilt. Amber stood up, looking alarmed now. "Darius, stop it. You are scaring me. Did you take something? Did you dip into your own supply?" "No." Darius screamed. He backed away, knocking his chair over. The sound was loud, crashing through the house. He looked down at his plate. The half-eaten steak. "It is alive," he shrieked. "It is raw. It is flesh." "Amber, why are we eating flesh?" He grabbed the plate and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall, leaving a smear of grease and gravy that looked like blood. Amber rushed to him, trying to grab his arms. "Darius, stop. Don't touch me," he yelled, shoving her away. He looked at her, his eyes wide. Pupils dilated so much his eyes were entirely black. Your face. It is melting." "Why is your face melting?" "Darius, listen to me," Amber shouted, slapping him hard. "Wake up." But he could not hear her. He was trapped in the nightmare I had brewed for him. He fell to his knees, clutching his stomach. He looked at the floor. He stared intently at the hardwood planks. "Can you hear them?" he whispered. His voice was trembling with pure terror. "Hear who?" Amber asked, looking around wildly. "Them." Darius pointed at the floor. "Mrs. Johnson, she is scratching. She is right under the floorboards. She wants her teeth back, Amber. She wants her teeth." Amber froze. Her face went pale. "Darius, shut up," she hissed, looking toward the stairs. "Shut your mouth. She is coming up." Darius screamed, curling into a ball. "She is clawing through the wood. And Mr. Miller, he is with her. He has no eyes." "Why does he have no eyes, Amber?" "We took his eyes." "Darius, be quiet," Amber screamed. She tried to cover his mouth with her hand, but he bit her. She yelped and pulled back. "I told you we shouldn't have put them there," Darius sobbed, rocking back and forth. "The basement is full. The cement. It is cracking. They are coming out." This was it. The confession. He was spilling everything, screaming his crimes to the empty air. Amber looked desperate. She grabbed the steak knife from the table. I don't know what she intended to do, whether to threaten him or silence him permanently, but panic had taken the wheel. It was time. I stepped out of the shadows. My boots hit the floorboards with a heavy, deliberate thud. Amber spun around, knife in hand. Darius looked up, his eyes wild. I racked the slide of the shotgun. Clack, clack. The sound was unmistakable. It is the universal language of danger. It cuts through panic. It cuts through hallucination. Darius screamed a high-pitched wail of pure animal fear. He scrambled backward on his hands and knees, crashing into the china cabinet. "The devil!" he shrieked, pointing at me. "The devil is here. He has come for the collection." I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at them. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting them take in the image. The old man they thought was tied up and dying, standing tall, holding a 12-gauge shotgun, his face a mask of cold judgment. Amber dropped the knife. It clattered onto the floor. Her arrogance evaporated. She looked from the gun to me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. How did you get loose?" she stammered. I slowly descended the stairs, one step at a time, keeping the barrel pointed directly at Darius's chest. I didn't say a word until I reached the bottom landing. I looked at the overturned chair. I looked at the shattered plate. I looked at my son cowering in a puddle of his own urine, hallucinating ghosts. Then I looked at Amber. "Dinner looks delicious," I said, my voice steady and deep. I stepped over the broken porcelain and stood over Darius. He looked up at me, but he didn't see his father. He saw Judgment Day. "Please don't take me," he whimpered, shielding his face. "I put them in the ground. I put them deep. Don't make me dig them up." I looked at Amber. She was backing away toward the front door. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said, swinging the barrel toward her. "The door is locked, and the police are on their way." Raymond didn't just drive home Amber. He called the FBI task force. "They have been listening to everything for the last 10 minutes. Amber stopped. She looked at the windows. She looked at the door. She was trapped. But Darius wasn't finished. The drug was peaking. "He wants the ring!" Darius yelled, pointing at the basement door. "He wants the gold tooth. Give it to him, Amber. Give him the box." He tried to stand up, but his legs betrayed him. He collapsed again, retching dry heaves, racking his body. "It burns," he groaned, clutching his throat. "The fire, it is inside me. It is just the wine, son," I said coldly. "A special vintage. I call it the truth serum." "Ruth." Amber glared at me. "You poisoned him," she hissed. "You old psycho. You poisoned your own son." "I just gave him a little taste of his own medicine," I replied. "He will survive. The hallucinations will wear off in a few hours, just in time for him to give a full statement to the detectives." Darius rolled onto his back, staring at the chandelier above him. "The lights," he whispered. "They are falling. Everything is falling." I looked up at the chandelier, the one I had loosened. "Don't move," I warned them. But Amber didn't listen. She saw Darius distracted. She saw me looking up. She thought she saw an opening. She lunged for the steak knife on the floor. "No," I shouted. But it wasn't me she had to worry about. As she lunged, she bumped the heavy oak table. The vibration traveled up the wall. Above us, the carabiner I had loosened gave way. Snap. 50 pounds of brass and crystal detached from the ceiling. It didn't fall on Amber. It didn't fall on me. It fell directly onto the spot where Darius was thrashing. Gravity is a harsh judge. But before it hit, I tackled Amber, pushing her out of the splash zone, not to save her, but to save the witness. The crash was deafening. Crystal shattered like a bomb going off. Dust and plaster filled the air, and then silence. I stood up coughing, waving the dust away. Darius lay under the wreckage. He wasn't moving. But I could hear him groaning. He was alive, broken but alive. I looked down at Amber. She was lying on the floor covered in white dust, staring at the carnage with wide, shocked eyes. I pumped the shotgun again, ejecting a non-existent shell just for effect. "I think dinner is over," I said. "Clean this up. The police will be here in 5 minutes, and I want the house to look presentable when they arrest you." The dust from the fallen chandelier still hung in the air like a fog of war. Darius pushed himself up from the debris. His face was cut by shards of crystal and blood trickled down his forehead, mixing with the sweat of his hallucination. The drug was peaking now. He did not look like a real estate agent anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. His eyes were wide, wild, and completely black. He looked at me standing on the landing of the stairs, and he did not see his father. He saw the gatekeeper to hell. I backed up slowly. 1 step, 2 steps. I was baiting him. I needed him to come to me. I needed him to cross the line I had drawn in the sand. "Come on, Darius," I said, my voice echoing in the silent house. "Come and finish what you started. Show me what kind of man you really are." Darius let out a guttural roar. It was a sound I had never heard from him before. It was the sound of pure madness. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the broken glass. "I will kill you!" he screamed, spitting blood. "I will bury you with the others!" he charged. He ran for the stairs, his heavy footsteps pounding against the wood. He was fast, fueled by adrenaline and the Jimson weed. He took the steps 2 at a time, his hands reaching out to strangle me. I stood my ground on the top landing. I did not raise the shotgun. I did not need to. I had a better weapon. Gravity. Darius hit the 4th step. The step I had pried loose 3 hours ago. He planted his full weight on the oak tread, preparing to launch himself at me. Crack. The sound was louder than a gunshot. The wood split instantly. The tread flipped forward like a trapdoor. Darius's foot plunged into the gap, catching his shin on the stringer. His momentum carried his body forward, but his legs stayed behind. Snap. The sound of his tibia breaking was wet and sickening. It turned my stomach, but I did not look away. Darius screamed. It was a high-pitched wail of agony that cut through the drug-induced haze. He tumbled backward, cartwheeling down the stairs. He hit every step on the way down, a chaotic mess of limbs and broken ambition. He landed in a heap at the bottom of the stairs, right at Amber's feet. He lay there groaning, clutching his leg. It was bent at an unnatural angle just below the knee. The bone was pressing against the fabric of his trousers. "Help me," he sobbed, reaching out to Amber. "Amber, help me. It hurts. The fire. The fire is in my leg." I looked down at them from my high ground. I watched Amber. A normal person would scream. A wife would kneel down. A human being would call 911. Amber did none of those things. She looked down at her husband with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. She looked at him like he was a stain on her expensive rug. She took a step back to avoid his bloody hand reaching for her ankle. "You useless idiot," she spat. Her voice was ice cold. She looked up at me. Her eyes were not frantic anymore. They were dead. She realized the game was over. The plans were ruined. The money was gone. And when a narcissist loses control, they do not surrender. They escalate. She reached into her designer handbag. I racked the shotgun again instinctively, but I knew it was empty. I knew it was a bluff. Amber pulled out a compact pistol, a Smith & Wesson's snub nose. It was small, but at this range it was deadly. "Drop the gun, old man," she commanded. She raised the pistol, aiming it directly at my chest. Her hand was steady. She had done this before, or she had practiced for this moment. I lowered the shotgun slowly, leaning it against the wall. "So this is the real Amber," I said calmly. "No more sweet daughter-in-law, no more smiles. Shut up," she hissed. She kicked Darius in the ribs. "Get up, you coward. Get up and finish him." "I cannot." Darius wailed. "My leg. It is broken." Amber groaned in frustration. "I have to do everything myself," she muttered. She took a step up the stairs. "I am going to kill you, Grady," she said. "And then I am going to put the gun in Darius's hand. It will look like a murder-suicide. Tragedy strikes the Henderson family. Father and son die in a violent dispute. I will be the sole survivor, the grieving widow who inherits it all." She smiled. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. "It is actually better this way," she continued, climbing another step. "No loose ends, no witnesses, just me and the money." She was 10 feet away. I could see the rifling inside the barrel of her gun. I could see the tension in her trigger finger. "You forgot one thing, Amber," I said. I did not move. I did not beg. "What did I forget?" she sneered. "That you are a war hero, that you are tough. Bullets don't care about your medals, Grady." "No," I said. "You forgot that we live in the 21st century." I slowly reached into my pocket with my left hand. Amber flinched, almost firing, but she saw it was just a phone. I held the screen up facing her. The screen was bright. It showed a live video feed of her standing on the stairs, gun in hand. Next to the video, a stream of comments was scrolling up so fast it was a blur. Hearts, angry faces, shocked emojis. I am live on Facebook. Amber, I said. Her eyes flicked to the phone. Her smile faltered. I started the stream 5 minutes ago, I explained. Right before I came down the stairs. I titled it, The Truth About the Henderson Murders. I tapped the screen. Look at the counter, Amber. 512 people are watching you right now. They saw Darius confess. They saw you pull the gun. They heard your plan to stage a murder-suicide. Amber froze. She looked at the camera lens on the back of my phone like it was the eye of God. You are lying, she whispered. The signal. There is no signal in this house. I installed a range extender last week, I said. We are on 5G, crystal clear high definition. I began to read the comments out loud, my voice booming in the stairwell. Sarah from the church says, "Oh my God, I knew she was evil." Mike from the bowling alley says, "I am recording this. The police are on their way." And look, here is a comment from Detective Miller. He says, "Put the weapon down, Mrs. Henderson. We are 2 minutes away." Amber lowered the gun slightly. Her face drained of color. The reality of the digital age crashed down on her analog crime. She could kill me. She could kill Darius, but she could not kill the cloud. She could not kill the 500 witnesses who were currently sharing this stream to thousands more. "Turn it off!" she screamed. Her voice cracked. "Turn it off right now." "It is too late," I said. "Even if you shoot me, the video is already saved. It is already out there. You are famous, Amber, just not the way you wanted." Darius stopped moaning at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up at the phone. "Mom is watching," he whispered. "Mom sees you, Amber." Amber looked around the room wildly. She looked at the front door. She looked at the back door. She was doing the math. If she ran, she was a fugitive. If she stayed, she was a prisoner. She looked back at me. Hate burned in her eyes. Pure, concentrated malice. "I should have killed you the day I met you," she hissed. "You tried," I replied. "But you missed." Sirens. Faint at first, but growing louder by the second. Not just one car. A fleet. The blue and red lights began to flash against the living room curtains, cutting through the gloom. Amber looked at the window. Then she looked at the gun in her hand. For a second, I thought she was going to turn it on herself. I tensed up, ready to look away. But she didn't. She was too narcissistic for suicide. She believed she could talk her way out of it. She believed she could hire a lawyer and charm the jury. She engaged the safety and dropped the gun into her purse. She smoothed her hair. She wiped the dust off her dress. She took a deep breath and composed her face back into the mask of sanity. "I will tell them you attacked us," she said calmly. "I will tell them you went crazy with the shotgun and I pulled the gun in self-defense. It is your word against mine." I pointed the phone at her again. "Say cheese, Amber," I said. "The audience loves a plot twist." The front door shook. A heavy battering ram hit the oak. "Police, open up." I looked at Amber one last time. "The show is over," I said, "and you didn't get a curtain call." The sound of the sirens was getting louder, cutting through the humid Philadelphia night like a knife. But Amber did not run. She did not panic. Instead, a strange calm settled over her features. It was the calm of someone who believes they are a god among insects. She looked at the phone in my hand. Then she looked at me, and she started to laugh. It was not a nervous laugh. It was a genuine amused sound that chilled me to the bone. "You think a few hundred comments on Facebook scare me, Grady?" she asked, taking a step toward me. "You think the police scare me. I am a white woman with a pristine record and a law degree from Penn State. You are a senile black man with a history of heart problems and now apparently a violent psychotic break." She gestured to the wreckage of the chandelier and her broken husband moaning on the floor. "Look at this mess," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Who are they going to believe? The successful real estate developer trying to defend her family or the old veteran who thinks he is still in the jungle?" I kept the phone steady. The comments were flying by faster now. People were tagging the FBI. People were tagging the local news stations. But Amber was too arrogant to understand the power of the stream. She thought she could control the narrative because she had always controlled the narrative. "Tell them why, Amber," I prodded. "Tell the world why you did it." "Was it just for the money?" "Money," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You people are so small-minded. It is always about money with you, isn't it? Because you never have any. She walked over to Darius. He reached out a trembling hand toward her pant leg, hoping for some comfort. She kicked his hand away with her sharp heel. "Don't touch me," she spat. "You are disgusting. Look at you. Crying on the floor like a baby. I should have known you did not have the stomach for this. You were always weak, Darius. Just like your father. Just like this whole pathetic neighborhood." She turned to face the camera lens, addressing the invisible audience with a terrifying confidence. "You want to know why I did it?" she said, her voice rising. "Look around you. Look at this neighborhood. It is prime real estate. 5 minutes from downtown. Historic architecture. And look who is living in it." She waved her hand around the room as if gesturing to a pile of garbage. People who don't appreciate it. People who let their porches rot. People who sit on front stoops drinking cheap beer. People like Martha Johnson and Robert Miller. They were sitting on gold mines, but they were treating it like a landfill. I didn't just kill them, Grady. I evicted them. I did this city a favor. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me, but I held my ground. "So it was a hate crime," I said quietly. "You targeted them because they were black. I targeted them because they were in the way." She corrected me, her eyes flashing with a cold blue fire. "But yes, let's be honest. I hate everything about this place. I hate the smell of your cooking. I hate your loud music. I hate the way you people think you own the history of this city just because you have lived here for 50 years. You don't own anything. You just occupy space until someone better comes along to improve the value." She pointed a manicured finger at Darius. "And him. Do you think I married him for love? Please, I married him because he was the perfect Trojan horse, a black face to gain the trust of the community. Who would suspect the nice Henderson boy? Who would suspect the son of the local war hero? He was my key, Grady. He unlocked every door on this block. He got me into their living rooms. He got me into their wills. And once I had what I wanted, I was going to flush him just like I flushed the rest of them." Darius let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. He finally understood. The suits, the cars, the lifestyle, it was all a leash. He was never her partner. He was her pet. And now he was her scapegoat. "You are a monster," Darius whispered. "I am a visionary," Amber snapped. "I had a plan to turn this slum into the Obsidian, a luxury complex. Glass walls, rooftop gardens, people who actually matter would have lived here. But you two, you just couldn't die quietly, could you? You had to hold on. You had to fight." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw the mask slip completely. Underneath the beauty and the expensive makeup, there was just a gaping maw of hatred. "I should have doubled the dose on day one," she hissed. "I should have smothered you in your sleep the night I moved in, but I wanted it to be legal. I wanted to do it by the book. That was my mistake. Trying to be civilized with savages." The sirens were deafening now. They were right outside. I could hear car doors slamming. I could hear the heavy boots of officers running up the driveway. Amber heard them too. A flicker of realization crossed her face. She realized she could not talk her way out of this, not with the confession she had just made. She looked at the phone in my hand. The red recording light was blinking. "Give me that phone!" she screamed. She lunged at me. She was fast, fueled by the desperation of a rat in a trap. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, digging her nails into my skin. I did not fight her. I let her take it. She snatched the phone from my hand and smashed it onto the hardwood floor. She stomped on it with her heel, shattering the screen, crushing the electronics until it was nothing but sparks and plastic shards. She stood over the broken device, panting heavily. Her chest was heaving. She looked up at me with a triumphant smile. "There," she said, breathless. "No phone, no video, no evidence." She smoothed her hair back. "Now it is just your word against mine. And when the police come through that door, I will be the victim. I will tell them you attacked me. I will tell them you forced me to say those things at gunpoint." I looked at her. I looked at the broken phone on the floor. And then I started to laugh. It was a deep belly laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from seeing a joke that took 70 years to set up. Amber looked confused. "Why are you laughing?" she demanded. "You lost, old man." I shook my head. "You are young, Amber," I said. "You understand technology better than me. You know about live streams. You know about filters. But you forgot the most basic thing about the internet." I pointed to the shattered pieces of the phone. "The video is not in the phone, Amber. It is in the cloud." Her face went pale. The blood drained from her lips, leaving them looking like gray ash. What she whispered. Facebook saves the live stream automatically, I explained, savoring every syllable. Even if you destroy the camera, the broadcast is already on their servers. Those 500 people. They already shared it. Someone has already screen recorded it. It is on Twitter. It is on YouTube. You cannot stomp on the cloud, Amber. I took a step closer to her. You just confessed to multiple counts of first-degree murder, hate crimes, and conspiracy on a global stage. You didn't just tell the police, you told the world. Amber staggered back. She hit the wall and slid down it. Her legs gave out. The arrogance, the entitlement, the hate, it all evaporated, leaving nothing but a scared little girl who realized she had just dug her own grave. No, she whimpered. No, no, no. The front door exploded inward. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a battering ram. The heavy oak door splintered and flew open. Police, get on the ground. A dozen tactical lights flooded the hallway, blinding us. Men in body armor poured into the room, rifles raised. I raised my hands slowly, showing them my empty palms. Over here, officers, I shouted calmly. The trash is ready for pickup. I looked at Raymond, who was standing behind the SWAT team. He lowered his weapon and tipped his fedora at me. I looked down at Amber. She was curled up in a ball, covering her face, trying to hide from the lights, trying to hide from the truth. But there was nowhere to hide. The monster had been dragged into the light, and she was ugly. The sound of the battering ram hitting the front door echoed like thunder, shaking the very foundation of the house. Boom, boom, boom. The wood was splintering, giving way under the assault of justice. Amber stood there in the middle of the hallway, trapped between the incoming SWAT team and the old man she had tried to murder. For a second, I saw the calculation in her eyes, the cold mathematical assessment of a sociopath. She looked at the door, then she looked at me. She knew she was going to prison. She knew her life as a wealthy socialite was over. But Amber was not the type to surrender. If she was going down, she was going to scorch the earth. She reached into her purse and pulled out the snub-nosed pistol again. This time there was no hesitation, no monologuing. Her eyes were dead sharks swimming in a sea of hate. "I am taking you with me," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. She raised the gun, aiming directly at my head. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my feet stayed planted. I did not run. I did not duck. I knew something she didn't. I knew where she was standing. "Goodbye, Grady," she hissed, her finger tightening on the trigger. She took a step back to brace herself for the recoil. A tactical retreat. That was her mistake. Her high heel caught the tripwire I had strung across the entrance to the living room. It was a thin strand of high-tension wire, painted black, invisible against the dark hardwood floor. Amber gasped as her feet were swept out from under her. Her arms flailed wildly. The gun fired. Bang! The bullet went wide, burying itself harmlessly in the ceiling plaster. She fell backward with the momentum of a ragdoll. But she didn't just fall. As she flailed, she reached out blindly for something to grab. Her hand caught the heavy velvet drapes of the foyer window. She pulled them down with her weight. The curtain rod was connected to the heavy brass entryway lantern above her head, the one I had unscrewed just enough so that a sudden jerk would release it. It gave way. Amber hit the floor hard. A split second later, 20 pounds of brass and frosted glass came crashing down from the ceiling. Smash! It landed right next to her, exploding on impact. Amber screamed. It was a blood-curdling sound. A large shard of thick, jagged glass had sliced through her expensive dress and embedded itself deep into her calf. Blood, dark and arterial, began to pool on the polished floor. She tried to crawl away, dragging her injured leg, but the pain was too much. She collapsed, dropping the gun, crying and cursing in the dust and debris. Then the front door finally gave way. Crash. The heavy oak slab fell inward. Flashbang grenades rolled into the room. Bang. Flash. White light blinded me for a second, and a ringing sound filled my ears. Smoke filled the hallway. Through the haze I saw them. Black uniforms, helmets, shields. The FBI SWAT team poured into my house like a well-oiled machine. Police. Hands in the air. Get down. Get down. Red laser sights cut through the smoke, dancing across the walls, across Darius's broken body, across Amber's bleeding leg. I sat down slowly in my favorite armchair. I rested my hands on my knees, palms open. I was calm. I was the eye of the storm. Officers swarmed the room. They kicked the gun away from Amber's reach. Two men jumped on her, cuffing her hands behind her back as she screamed about her rights and her lawyers. Another team moved to Darius. He was still lying at the bottom of the stairs, clutching his broken leg, moaning about ghosts and teeth. They cuffed him too, dragging him away from the wreckage. Secure. Room clear. Suspects in custody. The shouts were professional clipped. A tall figure walked through the smoke. It was Raymond. He wasn't wearing body armor, just his trench coat and his fedora. He walked over to Amber, who was being hauled to her feet by two agents. She looked at him, her mascara running down her face, her hair matted with blood and dust. "You," she spat. "You ruin everything." Raymond didn't say a word. He just looked at her with pity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of latex gloves. He picked up the broken pieces of my phone from the floor and placed them into an evidence bag. Then he walked over to me. He looked at the shotgun leaning against the wall. He looked at the tripwire. He looked at the fallen lantern. "You okay, Sergeant?" he asked, his voice gruff with emotion. I looked at the chaos around me. My son in handcuffs. My daughter-in-law bleeding out on the floor. My house destroyed. I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, the air didn't smell like poison. It smelled like gunpowder and justice. "I am fine, Raymond," I said, brushing a speck of dust off my trousers. "Just a little house cleaning." An FBI agent approached us, his weapon lowered. He looked at me sitting calmly amidst the carnage like a king on his throne. "Sir," he asked, looking confused, "are you the hostage?" I looked at Darius being carried out on a stretcher, still raving. I looked at Amber glaring at me with hate-filled eyes as they shoved her into a patrol car. "No, son," I replied softly. "I am the homeowner, and I would like to press charges." The sun rose over Philadelphia, but it did not bring light. It brought the cold, harsh reality of a crime scene investigation. My house, the home I had built with my own hands 40 years ago, was now wrapped in yellow caution tape. The neighbors, the ones who were left, stood on their porches watching in silence. They were not gossiping. They were mourning. I sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, a paramedic checking my blood pressure. I refused to go to the hospital. I needed to see this through. I needed to see what my son had buried in the foundation of my life. Detective Miller came out of the house holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small black leather notebook. "We found this in the safe behind the painting," Miller said, his face grim. "Your son gave up the combination after 20 minutes of interrogation. He is trying to cut a deal. He claims he wrote everything down because Amber forced him to keep a ledger." I looked at the notebook. It was a moleskin, the kind Darius used to carry to college classes. Now it was a book of the dead. Miller opened it to a marked page. August 12th, he read aloud. "Project Garden. Subject, Martha Johnson. Dosage administered at 4 p.m. Subject ceased cardiac function at 7 p.m. Clean disposal. Assets secured." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. It was clinical. It was a business transaction. There was no remorse in those pages, just dates, names, and profit margins. Miller flipped further back. "There is a map in here, Mr. Henderson, a diagram of the property." He marked where they put them, where I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Miller pointed to the detached garage, the one Darius had insisted on repaving last summer. He said the concrete was cracking. He said he wanted to increase the property value. He wanted to pour a tomb. The forensic team brought in the heavy equipment, jackhammers, concrete saws. The sound was deafening, a mechanical scream that tore through the quiet neighborhood. I watched as they cut into the floor of the garage. Dust rose in choking white clouds, coating the expensive tools Darius had bought and never used. It took them 3 hours to break through the slab. The concrete was 6 inches thick, reinforced with rebar. He had built it to last. He had built it to hide his sins forever. When the jackhammers stopped, a heavy silence fell over the garage. The team switched to shovels, then to trowels and brushes. I saw a young officer turn away and vomit. They found the first one. It was wrapped in heavy-duty construction plastic and duct tape. The shape was small, fragile. I stepped closer, ignoring the protests of the officers. I had to know. They cut the plastic. It was Mrs. Higgins. She was still wearing her floral Sunday dress. Her hands were folded over her chest, but her ring finger was missing. I closed my eyes. I remembered the box in the basement, the ring in the plastic bag. They kept digging. Under the workbench, they found another one, Mr. Miller. By noon, they had recovered 4 bodies from the garage alone. 4 of my neighbors. 4 friends I had shared coffee with. 4 people who had trusted my son because he was a Henderson. But the diary said there were more. The team moved to the garden, Amber's prize-winning rose garden, the one she tended to with such devotion. "Dig here," Miller commanded, pointing to a patch of hydrangeas that were blooming with unnatural vibrancy. I watched as they unearthed the soil. The roots of the flowers were tangled in something that wasn't earth. 5 more, 9 people, 9 lives extinguished for a condo development. By the time the sun began to set, the count was official. Darius and Amber Henderson had murdered 9 elderly residents over the span of 3 years. They had turned my property into a mass grave. The news vans arrived. They swarmed the street like vultures. I could see the headlines on their monitors. The real estate killers. The property brothers of death. I saw my son's face on the screen. It was a mugshot taken hours ago. He looked pathetic, broken. He was crying. Then I saw Amber's mugshot. She wasn't crying. She was staring straight into the camera, her chin lifted in defiance. Even in handcuffs, even facing the death penalty, she still believed she was better than everyone else. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face as I walked toward Raymond's car. "Mr. Henderson, how did you not know? You lived in the house. How could you sleep on top of a graveyard?" I stopped. I looked at the reporter. He was young, hungry for a soundbite. "I didn't sleep," I said, my voice raspy. "I trusted, and that was my mistake." I looked back at my house. The front door was gone. The windows were broken. The garden was a muddy pit of exhumed bodies. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a monument to greed. Raymond put a hand on my shoulder. "Come on, Grady," he said softly. "Let's get out of here." I got into the car, but I kept my eyes on the house. I saw the basement window. I thought about the soundproof room. I thought about the teeth in the box. Darius had wanted to build an empire. He wanted to be a king of real estate. Well, he got his wish. He was famous now. The whole world knew his name. But he wouldn't be living in a penthouse. He would be living in a 6x8 cell. And Amber, the queen of the castle. She would spend the rest of her life in a cage surrounded by the very people she despised. We drove away, leaving the flashing lights behind. I was homeless. I was a widower. I was the father of a monster. But I was alive. And as long as I was alive, I had a mission. I would testify. I would sit in that courtroom every single day. I would look them in the eye. And I would make sure that every single one of those 9 people got justice. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. And this time, I wasn't fighting for my life. I was fighting for their souls. The courtroom was silent when the judge finally spoke the words that ended the war. I sat in the front row, my back straight, my medals pinned to my charcoal suit. I did not look at Darius as they led him away in chains. I did not look at Amber as she screamed her final curses at me, her voice cracking with a hatred that no longer had any power. 1 year has passed since that night. 1 year since I watched the FBI dig up my garage and pull the secrets out of the concrete. The sentencing was a formality. Amber received life without the possibility of parole. Her arrogance did not save her. Her law degree did not save her. The digital cloud held her confession, and the world saw the monster behind the manicured mask. Darius took a plea deal, 40 years in a maximum security facility. He sends me letters every month from his cell. He begs for forgiveness. He tells me he was manipulated. He tells me he misses the Sunday dinners. I do not open them. I take those envelopes straight to the fireplace and watch them turn to ash. There is no room for lies in my home anymore. The state seized everything. The cars, the designer clothes, the bank accounts filled with the stolen equity of our dead neighbors. Because I was the whistleblower and the primary victim, the court awarded me a massive settlement from those liquidated assets. It was nearly $3 million. To some, that sounds like a lottery win. To me, it smelled like Martha Johnson's blood and Robert Miller's stolen dreams. I could not keep that money for myself. I could not buy a new life with the ghosts of my friends. So I did the only thing a sergeant in the Engineer Corps knows how to do. I started building. I established the Henderson Shield Foundation. We did not build luxury condos. We did not build glass towers for the wealthy. I used every cent of that blood money to buy back the properties that the shell company had stolen. I hired local contractors, men from this neighborhood who knew the value of a solid foundation. We renovated Martha's house. We fixed the roof on Robert's place. We turned these houses into a sanctuary for the elderly who have no one else. Now when I walk down the street, I don't see red circles on a map. I see Mrs. Gable sitting on Martha's porch. She is 82 and was about to be evicted from her apartment downtown. Now she lives there for free, her safety guaranteed by the legacy of the friends we lost. I see young men from the neighborhood learning how to frame a wall and run a circuit under the guidance of the veterans I hired to run the foundation. We are not just fixing houses, we are healing the block. I returned to my own home, the keystone of the tragedy. People told me to sell it. They told me I shouldn't live in a house where my own son tried to kill me. They said the memories would be too heavy, but they don't understand. A house is not just wood and nails. It is a record of our lives. I spent 6 months repairing the damage. I fixed the stairs I had broken. I replaced the chandelier. I filled in the garage with fresh, reinforced concrete. But I left the scars. I did not sand down the mark on the bathroom floor where I fell that first night. I did not paint over the small dent in the bedroom door where I wedged the chair to keep my son out. Those marks are medals of honor. They are reminders that I am still here. Like the scars on my own hands, they tell a story of survival. The house is like me now. It has been through a war. It has been damaged and rebuilt. It is uneven in places and the floors still creak when the wind blows from the east, but it is solid. It is standing. Every morning I wake up at 6. My joints ache and my thumb still clicks when I move it, but I am alive. I make a pot of coffee. Strong, black, no sugar, just like we used to drink it in the motor pool in Detroit. I take my mug and I go out to the front porch. I have a new rocking chair made of solid oak. I sit there and I watch the sun come up over Philadelphia. I see the neighborhood waking up. I see the kids walking to school. I see the new residents of the Henderson Shield houses waving to each other. They call me Mr. Grady. Some of them call me the hero of Maple Street. I am not a hero. I am just a man who refused to be buried before he was dead. The loneliness used to scare me after Beatrice passed. I thought the silence of the house was an enemy. I thought that being alone at 73 meant I was irrelevant. That was the lie Darius and Amber used to get inside my head. They tried to make me believe that because I was old, I was a burden. They tried to make me feel small so they could feel powerful. But I have learned a brutal truth. Loneliness is not the enemy. You can be alone in a house and feel perfectly at peace. You can be alone and be a king. The real enemy is the person who sits at your table and smiles while they pour poison in your cup. The real danger is the one who shares your blood but has no soul. I sip my coffee and feel the warmth spread through my chest. The air is clear today. There is no scent of chemicals or deception. Just the smell of the city waking up and the faint aroma of the roses blooming in the garden where the monsters used to hide their sins. I have replanted that garden. Now it grows for the living. I am 74 years old. My son is in prison. My house is a fortress of memories. And I am the happiest I have ever been. Not because I am rich, not because I won, but because I am free. I don't have to look over my shoulder. I don't have to wonder if the people I love are trying to kill me. I have surrounded myself with a new family, a family of choice, a family of respect. The neighborhood is changing, but this time it is changing for the better. The glass condos might still go up on the next block, but on this street the houses belong to the people who built them. We are the gatekeepers. We are the ones who remember. I set my mug down on the side table. The sun is fully up now. It is a beautiful day. I have work to do at the foundation later this afternoon. We are looking at a house on the corner that needs new wiring. I am going to teach a 20-year-old kid how to trace a circuit without getting shocked. I am going to pass on what I know. Life goes on. It is simpler now, authentic. I have learned that true strength is not found in how much you can build, but in what you are willing to tear down to protect the truth. I kept my promise to Beatrice. I kept our home, and I turned our pain into a shield for others. I close my eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the street. I am Grady Henderson. I am a builder. I am a survivor, and I am finally at home. Through the scars of betrayal, I learned a brutal truth: blood does not guarantee loyalty. My son was my flesh and blood, but he chose greed over humanity. I spent my life building a shelter for him, only for him to try and bury me underneath it. But this story is not just about darkness, it is about the resilience of the human spirit. At 73, when society expected me to be weak, I found strength in my experience. We must protect ourselves not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Trust is precious. Verify it, cherish it, but never let it blind you to the reality of who people truly are. It was a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 14 months since the night the sirens stopped being a sound of fear and became the sound of my liberation. I was sitting in the small office of the Henderson Shield Foundation looking over the blueprints for our next project, a community center for the elderly on the corner of Pine Street. The sun was slanting through the window, casting long, peaceful shadows across my desk. The air smelled of fresh coffee and old wood. For the first time in a decade, my mind wasn't a battlefield. It was a workshop. A knock at the door broke my concentration. It was Raymond. He wasn't wearing his trench coat today. He looked younger, lighter, as if the weight of the neighborhood's secrets had finally lifted from his shoulders, too. He handed me a thick manila envelope with a legal seal from the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. "This just came in via courier, Grady," Raymond said. His voice was quiet, respectful. "I think this is the final chapter." I took the envelope. My hand was steady, the tremors of the poison long gone, replaced by the solid strength of a man who knew exactly where he stood. I used a brass letter opener, a gift from the widow of Mr. Miller, to slide the seal. Inside was a formal notification from the state attorney's office and a smaller, crumpled piece of lined yellow paper. I read the official report first. It was cold, clinical, and final. Amber Henderson, inmate number 7429-B, was dead. The report stated that she had been found in her cell during the early morning rounds. She had used a bed sheet and the metal frame of her bunk. There was no sign of a struggle, no foul play. The psychological evaluation attached to the file noted that she had suffered a total mental collapse over the last few weeks. In the general population of a state prison, Amber was no longer the brilliant architect or the wealthy socialite. She was just a woman who had murdered her neighbors for money. The other inmates had no respect for her. The guards had no pity. She had spent her entire life believing she was superior, a god among insects, and when that illusion was stripped away, she had nothing left. She couldn't handle being a number. She couldn't handle the silence of a cell where no one cared about her law degree or her expensive taste. I looked at the crumpled yellow paper. It was a note found on her pillow. It was only 4 words long, written in the sharp, aggressive handwriting I had seen on the fake deeds and the poisoned documents. "You won, old man." I stared at those words for a long time. There was no joy in my heart, no sense of triumph. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a survivor. I looked out the window at the street below. I saw the houses we had reclaimed. I saw the people living in them, safe and warm. I saw the life that had returned to a block that was once marked for death. Amber thought this was a game. She thought life was a series of wins and losses of predators and prey. She died thinking she had lost a match. She never understood that she had lost her humanity long before she lost her freedom. She died in a cage of her own making, built from the bricks of her hatred and the mortar of her greed. I walked over to the small cast-iron stove in the corner of the office. I opened the door and watched the orange embers glow. I took the legal report and the note and I dropped them into the fire. I watched the edges curl and turn black. I watched the words "You won" disappear into the flames, turning into gray ash that drifted up the chimney and out into the Philadelphia sky. That was the end of Amber. She was gone. A footnote in a history of crime. A ghost that would eventually be forgotten by everyone except the cold concrete of a prison floor. I thought about Darius sitting in his cell 300 miles away. I heard he had stopped eating for a while after the news reached him. He was still trying to find someone to blame. He was still writing letters to lawyers, still claiming he was a victim. He would spend 40 years in that cycle, a man who never learned that the only person who can truly imprison you is yourself. I walked back to my desk and picked up my mug of black coffee. I walked out onto the porch of the foundation building. The neighborhood was vibrant. I saw the kids playing stickball in the street. I saw the laundry hanging from the lines. I saw the life that Amber wanted to pave over with glass and steel. I sat in my chair and took a sip of the coffee. It was hot and bitter, real. I looked at my hands, scarred and worn but clean. I had protected my home. I had saved my neighbors. I had honored the memory of Beatrice and the friends we lost. The payoff wasn't the money. It wasn't the settlement or the foundation. The payoff was this moment. The ability to sit in the sun, to breathe clean air, and to know that the monsters were gone. I wasn't the prey. I wasn't the victim. I was the builder who stood his ground when the storm came. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the sun soak into my old bones. The war was over. The silence was mine. And for the first time in 74 years, I knew exactly what it felt like to be truly home. Through the scars of betrayal, I learned a brutal truth. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. My son was my flesh and blood, but he chose greed over humanity. I spent my life building a shelter for him only for him to try and bury me underneath it. But this story isn't just about darkness. It's about the resilience of the human spirit. At 73, when society expected me to be weak, I found strength in my experience. We must protect ourselves not out of fear but out of self-respect. Trust is precious. Verify it, cherish it, but never let it blind you to the reality of who people truly are. If you found strength in my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand your ground against someone you trusted? I want to hear your stories of resilience. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another life story. Thank you for listening, and remember, your story isn't over until you say it is. See you in the next one.